Welcome to the Bellevue City Council regular meeting for Monday, September 28th, 2020. Can we have roll call, please, City Clerk?
Mayor Robinson.
I'm here.
Deputy Mayor Newenhouse.
Here.
Councilmember Barksdale.
Here.
Councilmember Lee.
Here.
Councilmember Robertson.
Present.
Councilmember Stokes.
Here.
And Councilmember Zahn.
Here.
Thank you.
All right. So we have a proclamation today for World Alzheimer's Day. And Councilmember Zahn, could you read that, please? And you can read the entire.
Yes. Okay. Yes, Mayor, I'd be more than happy to. Whereas it is important to honor the thousands of people in Bellevue impacted by Alzheimer's disease and other types of dementia, diseases for which there is currently no means of prevention, treatment, or cure. And whereas 120,000 people in Washington are now living with Alzheimer's disease, relying on 353,000 unpaid caregivers providing support to their loved ones. And whereas World Alzheimer's Day takes place annually on September 21st and is a day in which residents and businesses of Bellevue join others from across the globe to raise awareness and challenge the stigma that surrounds dementia. Now, therefore, I, on behalf of Lynn Robinson, Mayor of the City of Bellevue, Washington, and on behalf of its City Council, do hereby proclaim the 21st day of September 2020 World Alzheimer's Day in Bellevue, and urge all residents to join in this observance by visiting alzwa.org to learn more about Alzheimer's and ways to get involved in the cause, or donate in support of the care, support, and research that helps our neighbors facing dementia.
I let the Robin knows on the music and graphic.
Okay, next we have one of our two King County Council members representing Bellevue.
Have it next tomorrow.
We have Councilmember Reagan
I'm joking
Dunn.
off because this.
He represents the 9th District
Yeah, you don't hear
of
it coming
King
through
County,
the
which includes South
top.
Bellevue from the Botanical Gardens through Factoria and includes parts of West Bellevue. And Councilmember Dunn has served on the King County Council representing Bellevue since 2005. Welcome, Councilmember Dunn.
Thank you very much, Mayor Robinson. I sure appreciate the chance to be here, and I wish I could be in person. Of course, Bellevue's my home. My family's been here since February of 1950 when they moved to Viewcrest, which was the first planned development on the east side of the lake, and back at a time when the population of Bellevue was about 5,000 people. And it's just incredible to see it change and run the way it does. It is certainly one of the best run cities, in my judgment, in the county, and it's a privilege to represent it. I've got a PowerPoint I'd like to run through. The clerk doesn't mind. I'm a low-tech man in a high-tech world here, so sometimes it's better to have somebody else run the PowerPoint for me. But let me do the PowerPoint, and then if the Mayor Robinson will permit it, I'm happy to entertain any questions that folks may have. But let's just hit some of the high points on what we've been focusing on, and then focusing on
HDMI.
obviously one of the most, if not the most significant issue today is the widespread pandemic worldwide, nationwide, and throughout our state and region. Next slide, please. Thanks. Let me just give you the high points for the King County, Seattle King County Public Health Department is to flatten the curve, right? To make sure that we aren't all getting sick at the same time and overwhelming our local hospitals like Dover Lake and Evergreen and others' ability to handle and triage the most serious cases that come in. The executive has put together some significant sites, isolation, quarantine, assessment, recovery, shelter sites, and working hard to increase testing facilities. Some of that not without some conflict, but those facilities have been up and running across the county.
Working to mitigate the financial, economic, and social impacts of COVID-19. The federal government, as you are well aware, did a number of different federal pieces of legislation through the CARES Act funding. We received close to $300 million with the idea that it needed to be spent for sort of COVID-related expenses by the end of the year. So Jeannie Colwell serves as the budget chair, and we've already done 4 emergency budgets, and a lot of different programs have been funded, some in Bellevue, through that process. We are taking up yet another COVID supplemental late in the fall, transmitted in October. We'll probably handle it in November. And that is, there's still like $90 million available to move out into the community. So please continue to think, and I know Claudia also, my colleague, thinks in the same way. Please continue to think about programs that have been affected by COVID, or things that we can fund moving forward to help reduce the shock of the economic or housing challenges that we face there. We did a lot of other things. We extended the property tax payment deadline, and also created a more robust property tax payment plan. And finally, put forward Project CARE. I was proud to work on that. It taps into the spirit of volunteerism in a wide variety of ways to help people get engaged in this fight. Looking forward, we are planning for recovery. Things like disposable face coverings have been handed out in large numbers. Councilmember Balducci and I, she serves as chair of the council. I serve as vice chair of the council, and we have launched an economic recovery work group just a few days ago, which will be designed to try and get us out of the economic malaise associated with COVID-19 as quickly as possible, and hopefully in front of other communities in the country for a lot of different reasons, because I think we can help do things, interesting things, like, for example, the city of Renton is identifying right now a vaccination development siting process. They want to bring in a vaccine production and manufacturing, because once we identify the vaccine, then we have to actually mass produce it. And the idea of domestic production is cheaper, it's easier to get out to our people. And so those are the kinds of things we're focusing on. Done some other work that I'm proud of, updating our pandemic planning documents moving forward, and asking UW to study what we did right and what we did wrong, so we don't let this lesson be lost. We had very little information from the 1918 pandemic, the Spanish flu pandemic, and so had there been better literature, we might have been able to do a little bit better job in getting oriented out of the gate. And certainly we want to leave that legacy, those lessons learned for future generations, because it might be 10 years, it might be 100 before we have another pandemic. We need to save that information and pass it on to future generations. Next slide, please. Let me look back. I went through a lot of literature in the early 1918 pandemic, and this one came out of the National Geographic, which you might find interesting. It's the 1918 flu pandemic, which had a little bit higher mortality and a little bit younger subset of the population. But what you'll see is in Seattle, the black line represents deaths. And you'll see that there was a double event in Seattle, the second event being slightly less bad than the first. In Spokane, there was also a double event, but the second one was actually worse than the first. You'll also see that this brown area, or these boxes, those brownish gray areas are the duration of social distancing measures that they employed then. Social distancing, stay-at-home types of orders, masking. And what you see pretty clearly is when they stopped those measures, when they believed they had a handle on it, is exactly when we saw the pandemic get back out of control. Further research into this pandemic shows quite clearly that the locations and cities and jurisdictions that had stronger social distancing methods, better social distancing efforts, and did it for a longer time were the communities that came out of that recession more quickly. So there is a correlation between locking down and economic recovery, which is counter to some of what folks out there in the world are saying right now. But what you maybe notice is you see a pretty strong bipartisan effort, at least at the county level, to make sure that we continue those social distancing efforts moving forward. Next slide, please. And what you see here is very similar to what we saw in the 1918 pandemic. A double event. The blue lines represent new cases. You'll see the first event, as we all saw it in the spring, and then a lull, and then a second event in summer. The red, it represents actual deaths. We got, even though the infections were pretty close to the same, we got better at treating it. We got better at handling it. We got out in front, increased testing methods. All of that helped substantially, I think. And there are some cities and communities that went through a triple event in the 1918 pandemic. I hope we don't, but we might well go through yet a third event. I hope not, but if it happens, it likely would happen in the late fall. Next slide, please. This is the statewide unemployment surge that happened, and you'll see it tracks right on back to that first wave of the pandemic. Dramatic Depression era levels of unemployment. It spiked up there for a good period of time, almost 3 months, and then came back down some. They're still nowhere near where they were. We've got a ways to go, and part of that is economic uncertainty. Part of that is the social distancing efforts we put in place. There's no easy solution here, as you all know, but we do have a ways to go. And that's why we've been focusing on economic recovery as one of the key things we need to be doing looking forward. Next slide, please. Here's some legislation I've been working on, Project CARE, that spirit of volunteerism, payment plans for property tax bills, because we know the first thing people are going to do is wait on their taxes in an uncertain economic time. Countywide pandemic response plans updated, UW studies on what we're doing, hiring freezes proposed, this task force on economic recovery. I'm working right now on strengthening our video conferencing privacy laws for health-related programs like addiction and recovery meetings, that people should have a reasonable expectation of privacy, but because it's an online forum, don't necessarily get. There's some mischief making going on in that process. So we want to strengthen the law there. And then some good work on allowing the restaurant services and unincorporated to expand. Next slide, please. Talk a little bit about the King County Regional Homelessness Authority. I know you've heard a lot about this through suburban cities or sound cities, but we all sort of came to a compromise about a truly King County regional homelessness group of leaders. I serve on the executive committee along with Joe McDermott and Dow Constantine from the county. Jenny Durkin and a couple of Saddle Council members are on there, as well as a good number of suburban city council members or mayors. And let's go ahead to the next slide. It's created by
former Mayor Shelmanek on that.
Yes. So, well, he's on the where the rubber meets the road. He's on the task force. There's a sort of a higher level executive committee that sort of does the high level setup, including picking these folks. And we did get John on there, and I was proud to nominate him and appoint him. As a little bit of a fight for some reasons I won't really get into too much unless you have a question on it. But the LA is moving forward. It's supposed to coordinate, unify our response between Seattle, King County, and the other entities, including the suburban cities. We're going to dedicate, or at least we plan, about $55 million, including almost $2 million for startup. And then Seattle would go in for about $75 million, all in $2 million for startup costs. So the normal budget process still controls the budget appropriations. Next slide. So there's that governing board we talked about. You can see the mayors that are on there. Angela's on there, Nancy Backus, Ed Prince from Rent. You know a lot of these folks, some lived experience, coalition. And then you'll see down the implementation board. Claudia and I really were very pleased to see John Shelmanek interested and willing to do this. And, simple things like getting insurance, getting the space we need to make it work. hiring the firms to hire a CEO. He's good at that. He's come through sort of your training regimen, so to speak, and a lot of other life experiences. So I'm glad he is there. We're in the process. We've hired a firm that will generate a CEO, hoping for somebody with a lot of energy and great communication skills, and somebody who's willing to take a little bit of a risk, because this is not a sure thing by any stretch. We're going to hopefully hire that person later this fall. Next slide, please. Shifting gears over to the flood control district. I no longer chair that. Dave Updegrove and I switched places. I moved into vice chair and he took over chair. Let me show you some of the stuff we're doing in Bellevue. Next slide. Here's some of the flood control projects since we got this going. You'll see there's about $32 million in funding. Some of the big ones, like the Factoria Boulevard drainage, which is down there, kind of out in front of the old 7-Eleven and where the T-Mobile, down below T-Mobile headquarters. Also the Lower Coal Creek projects, a lot of significant bridges in Newport Shores, that area, upstream a little bit from that. So a lot of good stuff going on there. A lot of money in the Opportunity Fund that City of Bellevue is taking advantage of, as well as flood reduction grants, and you'll see some of those important ones there as well. Next slide, please. The biggest, perhaps most controversial, is the Willamore project, which is draining at Lake Sammamish, the outflow stream down there. You all are, I'm sure, aware of that February event earlier this year in the transition zone, 1,500 cubic feet per second. And it was exceeded the lake level performance. And not a good situation at all. It's exactly what we're trying to do to mitigate against it. Back in 2016, the Executive Committee approved 30% design that include modifications to Lake Sammamish's weir element to create a dynamic weir, meaning basically a small dam that could move up and down. And we have hired Flood Control District, pursued a third-party independent review of the design aspects being considered. We are looking at next steps. This isn't moving nearly fast enough from my perspective. I just feel like we need certainty and predictability, but it's not in my district. It's kind of right between Claudia Balducci's district and Kathy Lambert. So the advisory committee put $1 million forward for the 2021 proposal for the expenditures on that. And so if you have any update or opinion on what you think we should be doing on that, I'm happy to hear it. In anticipation of fall coming, crews were out last week removing vegetation in the transition zone to increase flow of the watering exit Lake Sammamish. It's really not enough in my judgment. We need to do something better, including a dynamic weir so that those docks don't come underwater. I think we're all concerned about the possibility of some kind of a class action lawsuit, and we need to move quickly to get an environmentally friendly way to keep that lake level functional. So that's my view anyway, for what it's worth. Next slide. Briefly on the King County budget. Next slide, please. We have a very not a good forecast for the remainder of the 2020 budget, about $100 million decrease in our general fund. Our mental illness and drug dependency decreased down 13+% at a time when we're seeing a rise in addictions and mental health challenges, as you know. Huge decrease in metro funding, lodging tax, rental car, and REIT. The third COVID emergency budget appropriated about $1 million to cover the costs of permitting. That helped them out. But the one good bright spot in all this is, in addition to that nearly $300 million that the federal government gave us the CARES Act, there was also $244 million subsidizing the transit agency. So at least this year, Metro, even with the cost, will come close to breaking even. And that's good. But next year and the year after could be much different. Next slide, please. And this is the 21-22 biennial budget forecast. These are the big hits. Again, these are tough to absorb in part because we're spending a bit of our rainy day fund, reserve funds to handle some of the local aspects of COVID and things that weren't, that the federal government's funding didn't take care of early on in our expenses. And we were the first community to be hit with this across the country. Another good sign, however, is the real estate market at this time, at least, appears to be fairly healthy. And so we're not seeing the same kind of dramatic diminution in property values like we saw in that bursting of the real estate bubble economy from the last recession. Next slide. So all our committees are standing down now, and we've got a budget. Flood control will have its own budget. Our 21-22 biennial budget was transmitted Tuesday by the executive. You probably heard some things related to that budget in terms of general fund and CX dollars being cut to various agencies. And then we got our 5th supplemental budget. And I think it's really important. We just don't know where the federal government's going to go in terms of funding that. If there are requests in the city of Bellevue, send them our way so that I can work with Claudia and get those inserted. Next slide. So those are the brief major websites you can take a look at for additional information. But it has been, can I say this? It's been challenging, just like for all of you. But I would just say that, America has always had challenges. Every generation of us has faced something in our past, grandparents, great-grandparents, whether it's wars or depressions or even pandemics, and we find a way to get through it. We'll get through this too, but it may not be easy, and we're maybe not quite out of the woods yet, but I'm optimistic it won't be too long. So with that, if the mayor will permit, Mayor Robinson, I'll be happy to take any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Dunn, for your presentation. That's fantastic. I'm going to call our council members in this order: Councilmember Zahn, Neuenhouse, Barksdale, Robertson, Stokes, Lee, and then myself. So Councilmember Zahn?
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Dunn, for that very thorough update on what's going on at the King County Council. We really appreciate working in partnership with King County. As you've mentioned, we have a lot of services that are provided by the county. And I'm especially grateful that you mentioned the mental illness and drug dependency fund, because I do think that as part of COVID, we have a lot of challenges with people that are struggling. So to the degree that that funding can be retained as much as possible is important. I think that we've also heard about King County Metro and the funds that are being reduced. And yet, as we come out of COVID, I think we are going to have a continual reliance on transit. So to the degree that we can make sure that we keep the services going will be really important. And then I think, as you said, we're very grateful that on the housing side, that our housing market is still very strong. And the hope is that as we move into COVID recovery, that we continue to be one of the first to emerge out of COVID. So appreciate your comments and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Council Member. Yeah, it's there's a lot packed into that question, and I appreciate very much your support. I think some agencies are going to do better than others. Metro will be one. We're going to have a big fight over criminal justice funding and the issue of deputies in the jail, and there's a lot of that stuff. But it could be worse. But the way we're going to get through this is working together and trying to augment those funding sources that we know are weak. My own view is the federal government started a substantial amount of investment to try and deal with COVID-19. I don't see why you stop that funding right in the middle of a second spike in a pandemic. It seems to me if you're going to go that far, you might as well follow through with the additional funding to get us through. We're going to have a big debt issue we'll have to deal with, but rather come out of this as opposed to ending sort of the sugar high that the economy's on and dump us down in the middle of the pandemic, which could create substantially more economic uncertainty. Thank you for your comments.
Yeah, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Neuenhouse.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Dunn, welcome again. Thank you for being here. Certainly appreciate both your leadership and Councilmember Balducci. Certainly we're well represented at the King County level. So great report. Thank you for all that detailed information, especially the comparison to the what's it, 1918 there, the pandemic that we went through once before. And it is a shame that we don't have better documentation surrounding that. And I appreciate your willingness to make sure that if this does happen again, which it very well might, but who knows when, 10 or 100 years, we're going to be better prepared to deal with it. A couple of quick questions for you. First, you had mentioned this vaccination process in Renton. Is that something that King County is directly leading in Renton, or is that a City of Renton initiative? And is there any talk of helping Bellevue get set up in a similar type of vaccination process so that we're prepared when there is a vaccination to take advantage of it?
Yeah, good question. I reached out to, I read some stuff that Bill Gates was saying, and he talked about the challenge. It's one thing to have Johnson & Johnson, for example, or some other multinational identify the vaccine.
Yeah.
It's quite another to mass produce it and get it in distribution. And so I'd rather have it here than in, France or Russia or somewhere else. And so, yeah, we reached out and we worked together on that. But there's no reason why we can't. And there's some matching dollars available as well through the Gates Foundation and other sources as well we could take advantage of. So it's an example of, for example, World War II, it was the West Coast of the United States that helped shipbuilding and all the other military stuff that helped pull us out. That might be a little bit of an example. I'd sure like to, I think we can really do the best thing, not only for our region and the workers who are unemployed, but for the country, if we can follow through with our commitment, strong social distancing, and then make the investments up front early to bring us out, bring the best parts of the public sector and the private sector together. So I'd love to work with you, Councilmember Newhouse, on that and anything else.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And thank you for that. Next question on Eastgate, the quarantine isolation site there in Eastgate. Is that currently slated to be used at all, or is that just an emergency backup? And this is a question I get quite often from Eastgate residents. Is that just there as a backup of the other sites or get filled up? And is there any intention to use it in the short term, or is it really just as a backup if needed?
Well, city staff might know the most recent. I haven't had a chance to talk with our Tony Wright on that recently. I don't think it's a primary point at this time. Okay. There has been discussion about, for example, the executive rolled out a 0.1% sales tax for low income homeless housing. Mm-hmm. Just recently, that we would bond against that revenue stream and come up with $400 million. Does that mean that site is identified for that? Like the Red Lion in Renton and the hotel down in Kent that have been highly controversial.
Right.
The answer that I've been told repeatedly and emphatically by the executive is no, the cities will be the ones that will make the choice to do that. I'd like to take them at their word, but I'd like to see that in writing as well. I want to make sure that it is the cities and the city planning process and your land use laws and a policy decision by the council that are the ones that make the final choice. I don't want to see King County or through its public health emergency authority push something into a community.
Agreed. One last question for you. Certainly at the King County level, as well as every municipality right now, dealing with some very challenging budget issues right now as we work on our biennial budget right now. And I've been paying close attention at the King County level as well. And one of the things that struck me is about the executive's proposal to the 6.5 divestment from King County's law enforcement budget. Do you think that's going to have any implications for Bellevue, and if so, how?
Well, you saw 100 officers cut, or up to 100 officers cut in the city of Seattle. And we're looking at around somewhere between 30 and 40 sheriff's deputies cut from the force. There's a dozen FTs cut immediately, but the sort of the devil's in the details. There's no filling of attrition, and we have, a couple dozen officers retire out of the size of the police force. So 130 to 140 officers in King County right off the top. That doesn't include the 38 other city jurisdictions. So not directly necessarily to your police service, but crime doesn't really care whether it's, in Renton or Newcastle or Bellevue or Kirkland, or it comes across the bridge, we all know. So that, in my view anyway, that substantial of a reduction in our law enforcement capability is going to have problems countywide, because look, violent criminals a social worker's not going to help a violent criminal. A social worker's not going to help, organized crime. There are substantial organized crime operations happening right now in King County. Some of them I know about, and it's not good. And the law enforcement presence is really critical. I mean, people, well, the feds will take care of it. No, 95% of all law enforcement is at the local level. The feds have very little resource. So I have very strong concerns about that level of funding cuts without really thinking it through. That's my own view.
Yeah, no, appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Barksdale.
Thank you, Mayor. Good to see you, Councilmember Dunn, and thanks for all the work that you and Council Chair Balducci are doing in support of the city. I just want to say I really appreciate all the work that King County is doing around COVID. It takes quite a bit of the pressure, not to say that we didn't have any pressure, but quite a bit of the pressure off of the city, and in terms of the coordination and with the help with the funding. So thank you for that. For the Willamore project, I just want to liaison to the King County Flood Control District, and just want to say I think I've been pretty engaged on that work, and the dynamic weir is definitely a piece of the puzzle, I would say, especially as it relates to gradual conveyance during a flood. I would say that the February event was a 10-year flood, and so if you think about say a 100-year flood, that transition zone is not was not built for that level of flooding. And so I think you asked for suggestions or ideas, and I think also looking at inflow in addition to resilience and flood mitigation or conveyances are things that we should look at.
Councilmember Barksdale, thanks very much, and great to see you on the council. Really and glad and excited you are there. You got a great background, and I'm glad you're there. Yeah, and your interest in the Willamore, what we're trying to do is return the old Sammamish River. That outflow was, used to be a river coming out of there until it was engineered into a slough for navigation purposes. But I mean, there's factions, factions fighting back and forth. I mean, at some point, we picked the most environmentally friendly of the three designs. It was a little bit more expensive, but I think it's worth it. And I just think at some point in time, we can just study this thing to the nth detail. I think we just have to make a call and move forward on it, get it done, make it a beautiful urban river corridor, and make sure it actually drains the lake. Those issues aren't mutually exclusive. We can accomplish both goals, I think. So thanks for your work on that as well, Councilmember.
Thank you.
Councilmember Robertson.
Thanks. I so appreciate the conversation and my colleagues getting to a lot of the issues that are important to me as well. Good to see you tonight, Councilmember Dunn. And wow, what a great presentation. It was very, very informative. So thank you for having prepping that for us. On the Willamore, I'll just add that I appreciate your mentioning of a dynamic weir. I think that that's going to be really important. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it needs to be a flood control project. It should be due for the environment, but it also needs to control the flooding. And you mentioned the possibility of a class action lawsuit. I've heard rumors of that as well. I really hope King County works with the lake owners and the people around there to help make it drain the way it should. So I really appreciate that, having that in your presentation. So I have two comments or questions tonight. One is about COVID. You talked about flattening the curve, and I know that that's been the goal all along, and we've really done it. King County has been amazing. We're down to 51 cases per 100,000 of positive tests. Our hospital rates are, the average admission is 0 to 2 countywide for the last 7 days. So, I mean, we have really done a great job with the masking, et cetera. What is, if anything, is the county doing to help get us safely reopened? Are you working with the governor? Because we need to make sure that the people can go back to work, that childcare and schools can reopen. It's really important to economic recovery and for the well-being of the day-to-day people who live in King County. So what are you?
We are working very closely with the governor, and Claudia and I are on phone calls most every morning, working with our public health experts. And I know, and I communicate with the governor's chief of staff pretty regularly. Claudia is on a call, I think, as chair of the council almost every day on that issue. We are doing, everything we can, providing good information, doing all the work to assist with the contact tracing and the PPE and everything that's going on. I think I've had a chance to see just briefly some of the other areas in the country, and we have a much stronger culture, I think, of the social distancing than maybe some of the other communities in America. A lot of it depends on the attitude of the governor of the state, or in some cases even the president. And so I think the best thing we can continue to do is sort of stay the course. And I think we'll find that, Florida, for example, was up towards 15,000 cases a day. And they're only down to about 3,000 cases a day, which is still something like 6 times what our entire state is facing. And they're going to open it all up. They don't care. They're opening it all now. Bars, everything. Okay. I don't know. Maybe this, the bars and restaurants do a little better, but I don't govern towards all of that. I govern to the more vulnerable members of society, the seniors there, the number of deaths. So it's a terrible set of choices we have to make. But at the end of the day, I think I got to choose that. And I'd like to think that we will come out of this based on the empirical data we've seen before more quickly if we just play it a little safer moving forward.
Yeah, our region's done great about the social distancing and the mask wearing. I never see people without a mask. So I think that's one of the reasons we're doing so well. So, before I forget, thank you and the rest of King County for the CARES Act money for the organizations in Bellevue. Finally, on transit service, that one of my colleagues, I think Councilmember Zahn touched on that. Having good transit service, I know that metro ridership is way down right now because people aren't commuting to work. People that were typical commuters are working from home. They're Zooming like we are. But once people start coming back, having the connections to the job centers is going to be really, really critical to not only get, serving the job centers in the regional growth strategy, but also making sure to help our economy come back. So right now at RTC, they're talking about changing the service guidelines, in which case productivity of routes will not be the highest priority anymore. And I just wanted to share that Bellevue and really the whole East Side and North End is concerned about that. I know you aren't on the RTC committee for King County, but your district's very concerned. And so I just want to let you know I'm the RTC member from Bellevue and would love to work with you and when this gets to council on that issue to make sure that we keep care of the spine that connects, that's the heart of the transit system. So anyway, thank you.
Yeah, really, really important to keep that spine going. Absolutely. And those are, nurses and doctors and a lot of people that ride that transit to get to the places that we need them to be so we can handle the pandemic. So that's a frontline type of thing we need to make investments in.
Okay, Councilmember Stokes.
Yeah, Reagan, good to see you. Good to see your COVID beard coming along there.
Likewise.
Yeah, it's really good to see you. And you covered a lot of topics. A couple of things I wanted to just talk about. One is on Willamore, and back when I was on the flood control district in 2016, is when we kind of changed that, got some emphasis and got some money, actually not just being stuck in a somewhere there and started focusing on it. But I agree with you totally. It's about time. We were working back before that in 2016, 2017, and it's 2020. I just think we have to really push that through and get it done. And it's important to not only us, but Redmond and everybody around it. I do want to say that I do applaud the fact that the flood control district is taking into account the fish habitat as well. And what has been shown very scientifically is that actually it contributes to flood control if it's all done properly. So I think that's good. And I think we've got to work on that flood certainly, and there are a lot of ways to do it. So I appreciate your work and the work that has been done by that committee, and looking forward to that getting completed before I wander off someplace else. So yeah. That's been good. The thing on the homeless, I was glad to hear the reports on that. That was, as you know, on the RPC and with county and the private industries involved, and all was a big battle as to how we're going to get this done. And your council member, said actually that Pete Von Weichbauer said he came on 15 years ago and there was a plan to cure homelessness in 10 years. And he didn't want to see that, it's 15 years now, and see that happen again. So I think the work we did to really get that structured properly seems to be working well now. That it's much more collaborative. And I was glad to see, John on there working in that part of it. And it's I think had a better collaboration between the county and the SCA was part of the thing that made it work. And that's been improved. I know you've worked on that. And so I appreciate that very, very much. That's a very important thing that we do on any kind of issues. And I think you've been one of the people who in the council, and you and Claudia really pushed that. So that's very good. The only other thing I wanted to mention is that I'm interested in seeing how we can work together better on the environment around Bellevue, and working in and with the flood control district as well as the King County, the King Conservation District, to increase some of that work. And again, working with the county, I think, has improved. So I'm looking forward to that and really appreciate all the work you do. And this wide range of report today has been very good. And I think we in King County and the East Side are really moving very well. And you've been a big part of that, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilmember Stokes. Very much appreciated too. And we got a lot of work to do. But Claudia and I are fun. We enjoy working together on this stuff. And even though I only have about 22,000 citizens of Bellevue, but important citizens south, mostly south of Interstate 90, and but still very important constituencies. And we do work well together. I appreciate your comments.
Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Wow, Councilmember Dunn, I'm so glad to see you and hear that your family is well. I'm so proud that you're carrying on a great legacy of your mother, Jennifer Dunn. And we go back a long way. Just for those of you who don't know, Reagan and his brother were on the league baseball team with my son. So we kind of grew up somewhat together. So proud that you are, representing our community, the public, as well, just as much as your mother did, when she was so influential and caring about the community. So anyway, of course, the COVID-19 is a big deal. And with your representation, we're glad that you have been addressing some of the very important issues. I just want to mention a couple of things, maybe see, how we can move forward. With the COVID-19 economy, as you see, it's dropped substantially. So many jurisdictions' revenue are being hit drastically. So the question is, how do we continue to deliver the services that we deliver without the money, with the decrease in revenue? The question I have is, do we tighten the belt? Do we make priority? What do we do? What are some of the choices we have to make? And what are some of the things that county council can do, on behalf of the local jurisdictions? Because we all local residents, we all pay tax to, King County, the same goal of serving the public. we know that it's a challenge, it's tough. You know that we start out with barely adequate, always struggle with budget. So with somebody like you there, it's really a blessing to voice and a seat and representation for our local community. Another thing, of course, that's important with COVID-19, we all want to make sure the revenue comes back. So we don't know how long this is going to last. So reopening of the city, of the economy is important. And so the question then is, what can we local government do? What can King County do to speed up this reopening? And what can we do to give the people more trust and confidence? And beside, of course, all the data we're getting, which is always, lagging. So there's a number of questions. So perhaps, you can address some of that so that we can work together, see how we can recover from this. It's a devastating pandemic. So thanks again. I'm very proud of you, and keep up the good work.
Thank you, Councilmember Lee, for your kind comments. And we sure have worked together for a good bit of time. Bellevue's always been a really well-run city, and it's amazing how reticent you all have been to just grab at new revenue streams and work with what you have. We're going to have to learn to work with what we have right now in King County, I think. However, we do have opportunities here. These federal dollars, they said there's $80 or $90 million of this COVID that hasn't been spent. And for me, what I've been advocating with my group, it's real tempting to grab this money and throw it out to nonprofit groups that maybe haven't had any support over the years. But what we should, in my judgment, be doing, a little bit of that's okay. We need to put that forward to those organizations we know that are going to provide critical safety nets for the areas where our general fund and other CX dollars can't support it. So there's a chance to feed that forward, and on the off chance that the federal government says, no more to the local governments, at least we'll have that. But if I'm talking to my partisan colleagues over in Congress, I'm going to say, look, you already put this much in, finish this. We're getting close. We think we're getting close based on models, at least, February, March time frame at the latest, that we should be getting through this. So let us get through this as opposed to dropping it off while we're still sick. So I think the federal government, I wouldn't always say that, but when you start something, don't get halfway through and then chicken out, I guess is my own view. So let's really leverage those federal dollars wisely. We got to, trim back some costs. We got to be thoughtful. We have to prioritize services in government as much as we can. So we'll all work together, I think, on this. But there's going to be a little bit of a cliff. Just here's an example of one cliff I'm worried about. The eviction moratorium is going to end soon. There's going to be a whole lot of folks who were able to stay in their homes that may well be forced out. And so Dow just announced basically a funding mechanism for, principally to house the homeless. And my concern with that's certainly where part of the money should go. We ought to be putting money into services for people who are about to become homeless and going to lose those homes. And I think instead of putting it on the backs of the landlords, let's just do direct subsidies, through the housing authority and other sources that we can keep people in their homes, because that is a huge part of it. And we can use the other part of that for dealing with our homeless population. And that's separate from what the Regional Homeless Governance Authority might come up with in terms of a revenue package moving forward. So tough questions, right squarely on all of our shoulders, and we'll find a way through it. I know we will.
One of the tough choices you have to make is, you mentioned about sheriff cutback, the 30, 40 positions. I think that's a tough choice. That might not be the right choice to make. Public safety, is very important, number one. So I'm very glad that we have somebody like you who can look at what is important for our community and speak on behalf of the public and the citizens. So why, is a sheriff?
Councilmember Lee, we need to move on here. maybe you can take that offline with Councilmember Dunn.
Absolutely.
I'll text you.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm just going to close really quickly. Councilmember Dunn, we've really appreciated your support of Bellevue in everything that we do here, whether it's the East Trail or flood control or COVID response. And I'm really proud of our city for investing so much money into rental assistance, because we understand that it's not just the tenant who's struggling, it's the landlords as well. And so the dollars that the county has so far given us to support that relief effort has been very much appreciated. And all I can say is keep them coming, and let's keep pushing for federal dollars to get through this, because it is indeed just a crisis for so many people and so many businesses. And we're doing a really good job month to month, but that's about all we can do. And so we need to continue supporting each other through this. Thank you for everything you've done, and thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, for having me. Appreciate the chance to serve with all of you.
Okay, take care.
Thank you.
All right, we are on to approval of our agenda. Is there a motion to approve our agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion is approved. Okay, and now we have oral communications. City Clerk, do we have people signed up for oral communications tonight?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Tonight there are 5 individuals who have signed up to speak. And with that, I will call our first speaker, who is Ruth Lipscomb. And Ms. Lipscomb, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Thank you. Your time begins now.
Thank you. My name is Ruth Lipscomb, and I live at 101 Cascade Key in Bellevue. I'm speaking to you today with my concerns related to the mayor's pledge to review the Bellevue Police Department's use of force policy. I applaud your intentions to make a concrete statement in the wake of the killings of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Manuel Ellis, and many others. Those tragedies are the most horrifying and visible results of a society that is steeped in racial injustice and silent complicity with white supremacy. It appears to me that the council's pledged review is very narrow in scope and only covers police department policy on one topic, the use of force. Fortunately, police officers use force rarely, but those incidents are not akin to being hit by a meteor. They are not completely random. They are instead the result of a long chain of decisions and responses, which are each influenced by norms, assumptions, expectations, and beliefs held by individuals and upheld by organizations. I urge the council to expand the current review's scope to include all the related policy areas of the police department. For instance, hiring, training, discipline, reporting, and data tracking. And I urge you to undertake a larger review using a racial equity lens of all the policies and practices in all departments of the city. Until you address the wider issues across all of Bellevue's practices, we cannot hope to benefit from a more inclusive and racially just community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker this evening is Christopher Randalls. Mr. Randalls, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Excellent. Yes. Your time begins now.
Excellent. Thank you. Good evening, council members. My name is Christopher Randalls, 15421 Southeast 4th Place, 98007. I'm speaking tonight in my capacity as the founder and chief organizer of Downtown for People, a grassroots organization of Bellevue community members, residents, workers, and students that have come together to advocate for a better transportation system downtown. I'm speaking tonight to voice our organization's vehement opposition to any build alternative for a new I-405 interchange, and to argue that the no-build alternative is the only proper choice for Bellevue's climate, our residents' safety, and our city's livability. Earlier this year, Council approved a safe systems framework to achieve the city's Vision Zero goals. This body rightly understood that a systemic and comprehensive approach that focused on vehicle speeds and road design was essential to achieving the ambitious target of 0 deaths and serious injuries on our streets by 2030. Additionally, Council has expressed strong support for bold actions to reduce our city's greenhouse gas emissions in the face of climate change, approving a 50% greenhouse gas emissions reduction by 2030 and a 20% VMT per capita reduction by that same date. These are bold, but attainable and laudable goals, but they must be followed through with concrete, meaningful action. And our organization was formed because building a new interstate interchange to increase vehicle throughput will take our city in the wrong direction. Study after study has shown that building more roads does not relieve traffic woes. On the contrary, making it easier to drive through increased road capacity merely increases the amount that people drive. This follows basic economic logic. If you make it easier to do something, more people will do it. And in this case, this happens at the expense of our environment. Transportation emissions account for 43% of Bellevue's greenhouse gases, the city's largest sector. Increasing the number of vehicles on our streets will only serve to slow Bellevue's needed environmental progress. Additionally, Bellevue's stated Vision Zero goals stand in direct contradiction to this project's mission. By helping move more cars more quickly on our streets, we put pedestrians and other vulnerable road users at greater risk. Finally, there are no details regarding what exact configurations of pedestrian, bike, and transit facilities will be included with these alternatives, and transportation staff appear to be operating under the implicit assumption that new growth can only be accommodated for with increased road capacity. But it's important to remember that we choose how we grow, and our organization has already made strides in imagining a better, safer, and more sustainable reality. On Saturday, Downtown for People led a group of 15 community members on a walk around South Downtown to discuss each of the proposed interchange options in detail. We also listened to the group as they described their struggles walking, biking, and taking transit downtown, and petitioned their feedback on how to make the non-motorized experience better. In the coming days, we will be sending you a document detailing this feedback and outlining our organization's formal position on why building this interchange does not serve Bellevue's stated interests in climate action and transportation safety. We hope you will take this information and use it to guide your decision-making in this process, and we hope that you arrive at the responsible conclusion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker this evening is Sally Fouché. And Ms. Fouché, can you hear me? Ms. Fouché, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yes, great, thank you. Your time begins now.
Great, thank you. Hi, my name is Sally Fouché, and I've lived in the Somerset Eastgate neighborhood for 35 years. This comment is in regards to communication about the mayor and council's pledge to evaluate Bellevue police use of force. While I wish the council had made a stronger statement about examining racial equity within Bellevue government and still await that process, I'm glad to see this step regarding a review of police use of force. However, I am concerned that it will be easy to misinformation about this process and thus limit participation in upcoming community forums. Sorry about that, as the current communication is cumbersome and obtuse. I hope this is not on purpose. For example, it was difficult for me to know the topic was even on your agenda tonight. First, I had to understand what was meant by the vague term advancing the mayor's pledge. Unless you are an insider or follow city council meetings very closely, you would have no idea this meant anything about an examination of police use of force. Please consider a more explicit title to help provide clarity and understanding for the community. Further, to get to the text of the mayor's pledge, I had to first visit the council meeting webpage, click to open the agenda, and another click to get to the pledge page, and then one more click to actually open the pledge. Neither the pledge itself nor the forum dates are listed on the city's website. I hope that will change this week. Regarding the forums themselves, I'm specifically interested in communications to the under 30 members of our community. I worked in a Bellevue high school for 6 years and also have a small business advising students. There are dozens and dozens of under 30s that I know, and they are fantastic members of our community. I hope you have plans for specifically targeted communications to younger populations. Lastly, clear and precise language without acronyms or insider language, as well as better efforts at communicating this process across all our communities, will go a long way towards demonstrating genuine commitment by the city to becoming the best city for all people we can possibly be. Thank you for this work. It's critically important to our future.
Thank you. The next speaker this evening is Mallory Vanabena. And Ms. Vanabena, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Perfect. Thank you. Your time begins now.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and Bellevue City Council members. My name is Mallory Vanabena, and I work with the Housing Development Consortium, or HDC. As a nonprofit membership association, our team, organizational members, and allies work to meet the affordable housing needs of all people, regardless of household income across King County. We strongly support Bellevue's work to reform parking standards in areas within transit corridors and to address the scarcity of land available to site permanently affordable housing communities by advancing the Affordable Housing Strategy C1. These are great steps in the right direction for a city that will absorb thousands of new jobs and multiple high-capacity transit stations in the coming years. The city's ambitious affordable housing strategy identifies additional actions that should be taken to grow in a more equitable way, including requiring affordability within transit-oriented development areas, incentivizing affordability within mixed income developments, and addressing needed recalibration of existing affordable housing programs and exemptions to increase participation. However, the implementation timeline of the affordable housing strategies must be expedited. The average two-bedroom apartment in the city currently rents for over $2,300 per month, and without swift and coordinated intervention from council and city staff, Bellevue will grow even less affordable to people of modest means who are the lifeblood of the city's vibrant economy. The blueprint is in place, and now is the time to act with urgency. Thank you for the work you and your colleagues and city staff do for the residents in Bellevue and for the opportunity to provide comment this evening. And please know that HDC is an eager partner for council, for staff, and all interested parties as we collectively work to meet the incredible need for affordable homes in the city. Thank you.
Thank you. The final speaker signed up this evening is Lei Wu. Ms. Wu, can you hear me? Ms. Wu, I see you connected. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you. Your time starts now.
Thank you. Dear Mayor Robertson, Deputy Mayor, and City Council members, I am here to speak about our support for the city to continue its effort regarding a cross-cultural center. First, we want to thank the city staff and the consultant team for their effort on the feasibility study. We appreciate the substantial analysis the study has provided, including reinforcing the strong desire and high level of enthusiasm within the community for such a center that focuses on cross-cultural diversity, equity issues, and others. The study also confirmed constraints at existing facilities, public or private. We also find the potential site development opportunities very interesting, very informative, and we appreciate the financial and operating models. As members of the Bellevue community with diverse backgrounds, we value diversity and cross-cultural understanding and integration. Each of us has experienced firsthand barriers to share our cultures with the whole Bellevue community. Much more importantly, our nation is experiencing sharp division across race and culture. Correspondingly, more important than ever, our nation and our community need space and opportunities for people to come together, understand each other, and heal the divide among us. COVID-19 is making physical gathering difficult for now. Over time, a home that enables, empowers sharing and understanding across culture, race, and so much more will bring our community together and will serve our region and beyond. We recommend that the city builds on its effort made in the past several years about this cross-cultural center. Specifically, we recommend that the city moves forward with developing conceptual design and programming options for an extraordinary cross-cultural center for this great community. The outcome will inform the city and community what this cross-cultural center looks like and what it takes to develop such a facility with sensible programming. Therefore, the city and the community stakeholders will be well positioned to develop partnership and pursue grants and funding opportunities for developing this center. Thank you very much. That's all.
Thank you for your comments. That reaches the end of our list of signups, Mayor.
Okay, great. Really appreciate all the community's comments tonight. Now we have the report of our city manager, Mr. Miyake.
Hey, Mayor. Let me see, make sure I'm unmuted. Hey, so we have two items this evening to report on. The first one is on the status update on advancing the mayor's pledge on reviewing our police department's use of force policies, as was referenced in some of the comments that you just heard about this in the oral communications. This particular update has been included in your meeting packet. As you may recall, I provided you an update a couple weeks ago informing you that we had hired the Office of Independent Review. We often reference it as OIR to assist the city with this process. I also mentioned we would return to council with more details with respect to the process. Joining us this evening is Nathan McCommon, our Deputy City Manager, to provide you with that update. Nathan?
Thank you, City Manager Miyake, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Newenhouse, and Council. It's a pleasure to speak before the Council this evening. As City Manager Miyake reported, the use of force policies are already under expert review by the consulting team of the Office of Independent Review. In addition to the policy analysis, specifically called out in the pledge is engagement with the community, quote, including a diverse range of input, experiences, and stories, unquote. Led again by the consulting team, the public engagement is planned to begin October 13. 3 listening sessions of 1 hour and a half each will be available and open to the general public of Bellevue. So some of you who might have read the packet on Friday may have noticed that 2 of those were listed as 13 and a half hours, that they are 1.5 hours each. So the first forum will be from 5:30 p.m. to 7 p.m. on Tuesday, October 13. The second forum will be held at midday from 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Thursday, October 15. And the third forum will also be held midday from 11:30 to 1 p.m. on Saturday, October 17. With different days of the week and times of the day, these options aim to accommodate different personal schedules. Given the continued limitations of public gatherings due to COVID, virtual platforms will be used for all the formal engagement in this process. There will be a blend of opportunities for interested stakeholders to contribute opinions and experiences even outside the forum schedule. The distribution of invitations will be broad through all communication channels, various media, and networks. To support that, a team of city staff is actively coordinating the invitation outreach with an eye toward equity across a broad range of ages and connecting in a welcoming way with those in the community that seldom engage with their city and government. In addition to English, the outreach will include the top 5 language groups in Bellevue. And beginning tonight, we extend an invitation to all residents of Bellevue to join one of the listening forums. Instructions for participation will be provided in the invitation blast to the public that will launch this week. In addition, the consultant will actively engage organized groups that have expressed interests aligned with police use of force. Following the public engagement, the consultants will include all the gathered information in its analysis and ultimate recommendations. Further information on advancing the pledge will be provided via the city website, social media, and supplemental communications. And with that, I'll turn it back over to City Manager Miyake.
Thank you, Nathan. Mayor, we have, and council members, we have one other item under the city manager's report this evening. We have some good news to share with you, and that is BTV recently received 5 national awards. Joining us this evening is Kate Behrens, our Deputy City Manager, to share a few more details about this good news. Kate?
Thank you, Mr. Miyake. As the city manager mentioned, we are pleased to recognize tonight Bellevue Television and our city communications team. They did recently at an award of the National Association of Telecommunication Officers and Advisors, otherwise known as NATOA, on September 3rd, receive 5 awards, including an award of excellence for a message on drowning prevention, featuring a very brave Bellevue resident who shared the story of her toddler who drowned. And we thank that citizen for being able to share that story and do so much good. We also received an overall award of honor for overall excellence for BTV, among other awards. We wanted to take just a moment to thank BTV and our partnership with Bellevue College. We have a partnership with them through an interlocal agreement that allows us to have students participate in creating BTV and creating many outreach pieces and our pieces that help residents remain connected with the city and what's happening now, which, as we are seeing today, is very important in the COVID-19 environment. So thank you to the college for their support. In addition, I want to mention staff involved, including Robin Steele, who manages the BTV team, Ben Shahabi, Dave Richardson, and Brad Harwood, who oversees the overall communications team. Congratulations.
Thank you, Kate. Mayor and council members, that concludes my reports for this evening.
Great, thank you so much. And congratulations to Bellevue TV. Okay, consent calendar. Do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I move to approve the consent calendar.
I'll second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. So we have 2 study session items. And Mr. Miyake, would you like to introduce the first one?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. The first item is the South Downtown I-405 access study. This again is information that was provided in your council packets this weekend. Just by way of background, the I-405 master plan was developed back in 2002. And that plan included a new half interchange in the South Downtown area. And although at that time, the exact location, exact configuration had not yet been determined, the purpose of the study that I referenced this evening is to identify a preferred alternative that will position the city to receive funding when opportunities arise and to help inform developers within the study area what to expect about future access option. This was before the council and was scheduled to come back to the council back in April 20th of 2020. But due to COVID, the meeting on this particular topic could not come back given the OPMA requirements. Alternatively, staff briefed council members individually back in late April and early May. And following the briefings, the decision was made to initiate the study and return to council later for a midpoint review following stakeholder and public engagement. And that's the point we are at now. This evening, staff is looking for confirmation or alternative direction on our staff recommendation to carry forward the alternatives that have passed the fatal flaw screening for further evaluation. The future evaluation will help inform council's selection of a preferred alternative at their meeting next year in February 2021. Joining us this evening is Andrew Singalakis, the director of our transportation department, as well as Shu Ming Ng, the engineering manager within the transportation department, for a presentation this evening. Again, we are looking for confirmation or alternative direction with respect to the staff recommendation. With that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Andrew.
Okay, thank you, City Manager Miyake and Mayor Robinson and Deputy Mayor Newenhouse and the City Council. And as Brad said, we're here tonight to seek direction from the council to carry forward alternatives that have been screened through a fatal flaw screening for further evaluation. And I would like to just mention as well that we've got Paula Stevens, the Assistant Director of Transportation, present, as well as Barrett Hansen, the Design Manager from WashDOT, and Carl Westby, who is also working for WashDOT. The project is important right now for 2 reasons. One is to position the city so that if there is a statewide transportation package, we would have an alternative that could be considered. But the second part of it is really giving the downtown development community some certainty over where the alternative will be located to see whether or not there have been alternatives that have been precluded by development, and also just to let everyone know where the future project would be. And as Brad said, this would have been the second presentation to council Back in late April, early May, we could not meet due to the governor's order. We briefed the council individually about moving forward with the study and specifically to exclude ramps on Main Street from consideration. The reason for that is that it doesn't meet the city's policy goals for Main Street. But in addition to that, it would have a real big impact on the East Main land use code amendment process. You would have to put that on hold in order to move ahead with this study and wait until we get to this point now before starting that. And there was a desire for things to be concurrent. Tonight we're going to be seeking the direction on carrying forward of the various alternatives. And with that, we'll actually go to the next slide. This is the agenda for the meeting: background, alternative screening, community input, the staff recommendation, and the directions sought. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Shuming.
Thank you, Andrew. And before I start, I'd like to acknowledge the great team that I have working on this project, including our partner from WashDOT, and particularly Marie Johnson on the public involvement side. So she has been done a great job. And a brief overview of the project history. The 405 master plan developed in 2002 is a multi-modal plan that includes roadway, transit, non-motorized elements, and even travel demand management strategies for the entire corridor. So as you see, heard, a number of components have been implemented since then. And one big element that is currently under construction is the express toll lane from Renton to Bellevue. So of the smaller components, that has two half interchanges in downtown Bellevue. The northern half is Northeast 10th Street. The southern half is somewhere in the Northeast 2nd Street vicinity. So the north half has been partially completed. As you know, the northbound on-ramp has been completed in 2012. And as part of the express toll lane project, the Main Street bridge need to be reconstructed. WashDOT in partnership with the city did a design study to make sure that new Main Street bridge will not preclude good options of adding the south half of the interchange option. So tonight, this is a midpoint report of that study. This study is to pick a preferred alternative, and implementation of it will be sometime down the road. It requires additional funding. So this new half interchange is needed to support the city's growth. And as you all know, there will be a substantial growth in coming years, particularly in the so-called area. And just for the downtown, Wilburton, and East Main, roughly we see 22 million square footage of office space and about 9,000 dwelling units will be added. So it represents a significant growth from what we have today. And so as Andrew mentioned, and what we need from the council is to eventually select a preferred alternative and configuration for this potential new interchange. To go through this process, we start off from initial alternatives. That's basically a brainstorm of all possible plausible ideas that could improve access to downtown Bellevue. And then we went through tier 1 screening, and then got into a more detailed tier 2 screening, and then filtering down to a preferred alternative. So we are about at the midpoint. And I wanted a tier 1 fit-of-law screening. It really involves 3 aspects. Look at how it is consistent with the city's plans and policies, whether it conforms to federal highway and Washington State DOT policies, because it is a interstate facility we're talking about accessing to. And then we look at the constructability, it really boils down to the cost, because with the modern technology, everything almost is possible, but at what cost? So on the technical analysis side, that's what we do. And on the parallel track is community engagement. We've engaged the community through mainly 3 venues: stakeholder forums, an interest group, and public open houses. So far we have had 3 stakeholder forums, and the stakeholders are identified as those people or business could be directly impacted by this potential project. And then the representatives of neighborhoods, either partially or completely within the study area. So the 5 neighborhoods are identified, and their representatives have been invited to participate to stakeholder forums. So this is what we heard from them about so far of the options we studied. So they are generally supportive of a new access to 405. They see the alternative in the southern part of the study area as more preferable to the northern part of the alternatives. They like us to incorporate this plan ideas with city other plans and multimodal aspects. One of the key aspects they provided is that the importance of preserving 114th Avenue, because some of the alternatives require either displacing or closing a portion of 114th Avenue. And we also heard that we need to be looking at the safety aspects and the traffic impact on local streets. And some people have raised the question why we dropped the Main Street alternative, and some others questioned why we include no new interchange as one of the options. On the public open house side, we've 2 open houses planned. We had one, over 2,000 people participate or visited. It is an online open house. Of those, one in every 10 visited the open house online, provided comments. Here are the highlights of the comments that we heard. And not surprisingly, each alternative received support and also concerns. And that we need to consider how it impacts bike and pedestrian travels, and also transit access. And some even suggest that we should prioritize non-motorized improvements over vehicle access. And and also suggested that we incorporate this concept with the other city initiatives. And they want us to consider induced demand. That is, there is a notion that every time when you build a roadway project or vehicle project, and it induces more vehicle traffic. And there are concerns about the additional traffic could be brought to local streets. And there are others commented that we need to address I-405 congestion first before this interchange can be fully utilized. So below, I'm going to go through briefly about all the options we looked at and some that we recommend to drop. And then I will go through those that recommend to carry forward in a little bit more detail. So those options that with the big red cross is recommend to be dropped from further evaluation. Starting from left is the so-called no new access. This is option that does not look at adding a new interchange. The second one that looked at the how we can pair with the existing Northeast Street Bridge to minimize the impact to 114th. And the next option, the third one, is to have a full access to the south, the southbound on and northbound flyover to downtown. And the last option on the screen is extending Northeast 2nd Street. This used to be a part of another option in the 2015 study by WashDOT to evaluate utility of these independent components. We break this option into two. So Northeast 2nd Street extension only, and then the other one I will mention later. And then there are different options at the Northeast 2nd Street and Main Street. And also in Southeast 2nd Street vicinity. All these are deemed to have serious issues as compared to the current city's policies and plans. And basically they have expect to have significant impact on the existing 114th Avenue. They would have impact on transit-oriented development. So for these reasons, they are recommended to be dropped. And then several options on the southern end of the study area. One is extending the Southeast 6th Street and to have access to express toll lanes that are currently under construction. And a variation, the second on the map, is extending the Southeast 6 instead of inside connection, this one to have outside connection to southbound. You will pair with the existing off-ramp to Lake Hills connector. And the third one is to have a Lake Hill connector on-ramp to southbound 405. And finally, this one is to have Lake Hill connector ramp to inside 405, and then to have a braided ramp or fly over to the outside. This one deemed to be very costly, involve a lot of structure. So it's recommended to be dropped. So with that, I'd like to go through a little bit more detail of the options that we recommend the council to conform that we carry forward for the analysis in tier 2. So this is a no new interchange option as required by Federal Highway and Washington State DOT. Every time when we look at adding new access to interstate facility, we have to make sure there's no good options on local street improvements to meet that demand. So the second one is extending the Northeast 2nd Street without new access to 405. This is to provide east-west connection to relieve current and future congestion on Northeast 4th Avenue Street, sorry. And then this one is, as I mentioned before, is to have an inside connection to 405 to the express toll lanes by extending Southeast 6th Street. And then this southbound on-ramp, it provide additional access to 405, and it pass with the current existing off-ramp to Lake Hills connector. Finally is the southbound to 405 from Lake Hill connector. Including this one and our last option, just before this one, they pair with the existing off-ramp to Lake Hill connector. I'd like to mention that these options are studied as individual components. And potentially we could combine these elements into a preferred alternative to if they have a good synergies among them. So with your confirmation, we will carry the alternatives as approved by you to tier 2 evaluation. This is what we'll be looking at in tier 2. We'll be looking at how it affects travel time on local streets as well as Interstate 405. We're going to look at how it affects access to properties and potential developments. We're going to look at how it may affect bike and pedestrian travel. Speaking of bike pedestrian travel, all these components that we study will have a bike and pedestrian components. For the purpose of just showing highlight the access, those details are not shown in the sketches. So we're going to also look at the impact, how that these alternative impact potential property development and economic development. We're going to look at the how they are consistent or conflict with the city plans and policies, and also look from an urban design aspect, how it may fit in with the city vision. And we're going to look at the cost. So this is a very complicated element. It includes right-of-way construction, impact mitigation, those impacts including wetland, property acquisition, impact to utilities, and even construction impact. And then on the community engagement side, we're going to have one more stakeholder forums and a public open house to share what we find from the tier 2 evaluation and get their input. We'll be coming back to the council in the early next year to report the findings from technical analysis as well as the public input or community input, and to have a preferred recommended preliminary preferred alternative for council's consideration. So to get to that point, we're looking to the council to give us a confirmation to carry these 5 alternatives forward as recommended by staff. So with that, and Andrew, did I miss anything? Would you like to add anything?
No, I think you hit it all. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for the presentation. So we see what the direction is that you're seeking from council. I'm going to call on council members in this order. And I want to encourage you to please keep your comments down to 3 minutes. And if we need to have another round of comments or questions, we'll do that as much as we need to. So we'll start with Councilmember Robertson, then Councilmember Zahn, Lee, Stokes, Barksdale, Deputy Mayor Newenhouse, and then myself. So Councilmember Robertson, would you like to start us off?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I've been very excited to see this come forward. I think that your criteria are absolutely right on. And I think that the ones that are carried forward are really the right ones to carry forward. That said, I'm a little skeptical about Northeast 2nd because it doesn't provide access to 405. And I understand that it also affects the circulation ability of people using 114th, and also could have some impacts on some of the redevelopment that will go along on the downtown OLB zone. So I'd be curious to hear what my colleagues think about that one, but I want to see access. My preference at this point, not having done the analysis, would be either the Lake Hills Connector or that combined with the Northeast or Southeast 6th HOV. I think that both of those show a lot of promise. I'd love to see if they can be combined. The other thing I would add is to the criteria is that I think that we need to look at the redevelopment potential of properties that are impacted for good or for ill. Maybe these are going to make Wilburton, when we finally do the rezone there, really unlock and sing, or maybe it's going to cut down some ability of some properties to redevelop with the vision that the city council has set. I just think we need to know which way. The other criteria I would like to have us look at is the impact of each of these options on transit. So especially 405 BRT and other rapid transit. I think that if there's one that works better for connectivity to get people, you know, where they need to go when they need to go there, we should know that. And finally, I know that there's folks who want to see no new connectivity added, but the bike and ped connectivity is important here. And also, it's not as if we build it there and they will come. They are coming. 25,000 new jobs are coming to downtown Bellevue in the next 5 years. Making sure that our whole system works really well is really important. So figuring out which of these options, including the no build, if that's the way it goes, works best to help us get people in and out of downtown in a very efficient manner. That's what I want to see. So really appreciate all the work you've done to date. And I'm looking forward to having you come back in about 3 or 4 more months and give us some more data. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Robertson. Okay, Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Shuming, for the presentation. It was very helpful to see all the work you've done and to eliminate those ones that don't make as much sense, because when we go into that tier 2, it's very helpful not to carry so many options forward that you just get overwhelmed with choices. With that said, I do have a couple of thoughts and comments. One is, I appreciate the fact that we are including the no build option, because I do think that in any analysis, we need to be able to look at what the current status quo is, so that we, if nothing else, always have a baseline to look at. And I think that when we look at all of our options, we always need to keep in mind that based on what we have today, are there other improvements we can make that actually create the system and the flow that we're looking for without the expense and the costs. The other one is that I absolutely agree that we need to make sure that transit is working, prioritizing and maintaining access. But I would say it's more than that. I want to make sure that when we're looking at these, that we really do have Vision Zero in mind, because we have had several fatalities last year, and already, I believe, a couple this year. So as we look at these options, I'd like to understand, and in fact, in the evaluation criteria, I don't see safety on the list. So I think I can maybe ascertain the one that talks about the ped and bike was intended to talk about safety, but I think the criteria should specifically call out Vision Zero and safety. And
yes,
then, right, does that make sense?
Yes, we have it just to cut too short on the presentation.
Okay, and then, you know, I also didn't see on there, and I believe, Shuming, when we had the briefing, you talked about the fact that the evaluation criteria, constructability as well as cost. So as we look at these options, there may be some that are going to be a lot more costly to design and build than other options. So I think that should also be in the mix. And then also timing. So my sense is that the option that has the express toll lane access to and from Southeast 6th, if that project could have actually been incorporated as part of the work that WashDOT is doing already with the design build, it would be designed and built a little more economically because they're already in that area. So if they finish the express toll lanes and then we come back in X number of years to do that work, does their alignment actually allow the access in that we are envisioning? Because if there's a way to actually incorporate some of that, we don't have to go back in, if we do choose that option, and have to demolish a bunch of infrastructure that was just built by WashDOT. So I do think that timing piece and alignment is important to consider. And then I believe 3 minutes are up.
I'll let you wrap up and then we'll move on. Do you want to wrap up or I'll come back to you?
Well, so my wrap up is my comment about how you're incorporating or having the discussion with WSDOT to align options and timing. Can you comment on that?
Do you want to comment on now or later?
I'll let you do a big comment at the end of all our comments. How's that?
Okay, thank you.
If that's not too confusing. Councilmember Lee.
Oh, thank you, Xiuming, for doing the yeoman's work and coming with the recommended alternatives. I heard a lot about, bike and pedestrian multimodal approach, but it sounded like to me you're already taking that into consideration in evaluating these alternatives. So I hope that those evaluation criteria will meet the public's demand, such as Vision Zero and all that stuff, right? So I assume that's done. Okay. So my question is, I'm no expert in figuring out which one is the right one. You guys are doing the job. You guys are paid to do it. I'm not. The question is, in no build alternative, that's the only question I have. I understand the reason for you need to compare with the no build when you're making the analysis, but you already did the north piece. So and it sounds to me, based on your presentation right at the beginning, the decision has been made already that you're going to have a north piece, you're going to have a south piece, right? So the north piece is already done. It's already begun. It's already done. So south piece should already be analyzed and it's already determined. So I'm just surprised. How come that's still not? And second, if it's not, that would be surprising to me that how does it connect with the 405? It's called 405 access. So if you chop that off, which is the new no build, it doesn't make sense to me. So unless somehow miraculously you can fix up the local street. In that case, why do you do with the north piece or whatever? We're not going to go back. I'm just saying, what is the historical context that we have to relook at the south piece? And then you have the no build. To me, logically, you look at the 4 which you propose and see which one would meet your criteria. Can you answer that?
The no build alternative is a requirement of the Federal Highway Administration and also Washington State Department of Transportation in order to look at a baseline and to figure out, if you don't do anything at all, is that going to be better than doing something? So it's just part of the process that we need to look at that no build alternative.
Okay, but hasn't it already been done before when you did the north piece? That's what I'm trying to say is, when you decide this is the plan, they already say, yeah, that's going to be a north piece, it's going to be south piece. And the north piece is already moving ahead. So how can the south piece say, no, you don't have to build anything?
Well, because
that doesn't make sense.
We are looking
Somebody
at
made a decision. So
different project alternatives. And so when you do look at a variety of alternatives, one of them needs to be the no build.
As a baseline.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. You know what I'm saying. All right, thanks.
All right, Councilmember Stokes.
Yeah, I agree with comments my colleagues have made. And I certainly understand the need for the no build and not necessarily inconsistent with the the north end. One of the concerns I had looking at all this, and I know you've taken this into account, but you're building an on-ramp and directing traffic into a street, a road that is already, when we get back to normal traffic, really jammed. I mean, I live over in Woodridge, and I come into downtown Bellevue, and I come up the connector and get on 116th. And if anybody knows, they've tried to do that in the morning and particularly in the evening, that traffic is, you just inch along. And people on 116th and getting to north to the connector are not going to 405. They're going the other way and getting around to I-5 and all that. So I assume you're taking that into account, the impact that that's going to have on, or for good or not, on traffic in that area, and how it will compound that, or whether, maybe it'll have some positive effect on it. But I don't see that mentioned at all, and I think that's a big concern. It's not as if you can just easily feed traffic onto the Lake Hills connector, and also onto, unless we're talking about actually doing some work on that part of the system and going around to the connector, and also going on, through the other side of Woodridge. That's also jammed up. So the capacity on those roads is probably at a maximum. And, we had terrific problems with people diverting through Woodridge and through other areas in the past. So I'm just concerned about that aspect of it. And I know we have to do something about 405, but I'm hoping we're looking at some other things that will actually help on that. And the other question, and this is a long range down the line, but I assume that you're taking into account the potential for ST3 coming through there. I know you have that as the blue line. So any of the construction is going to be done in conjunction with and taking that into account, I would hope. And I know you've dealt with the questions that have been raised by the public, and I think you have some good answers on that. I think it's absolutely something we have to do. And I really agree that I don't think a no build option is there in the cards, but you never know, because this is going to take some time to do this. But I think the main goal is what really works best to get people on and off of 405 in a way that doesn't just overwhelm a neighborhood, and keep that in mind. And I think that will help a lot. But good work, and it's going to take a lot of work to get this done. I want to mention that I think that the outreach you've done so far has been really good. And we just need to keep that up as well, so that people are engaged in this, and particularly the people who live in that area. And that's where I live. And so I'm, personally concerned about that. But I know we have to get some relief for 405. And of course, if we don't have the other side of 405 going south built, this is all going to be kind of for naught anyhow. So we're hoping that that's part of the long range plan as well. But great work, and I appreciate the way you've set it up. I think you have good alternatives, some much better than others, and looking forward to the next steps of this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Barksdale.
All right, thank you, Mayor. And thanks to staff for the great presentation and all the work that you've done so far. I just had a really quick question in terms of for the Southeast 2nd to 116th. Can you talk a little bit about how the Wilburton rezone and such could tie in, or how does that alternative relate to the work? Because I know there was some work on 116th that we had talked about as part of the CAC.
We have the funding that WashDOT has only takes it to 116th, and the rest of it, which is I think about $34 million, would take it all the way over to 120th. And in our current legislative priorities, it talks about going to 120th. So I kind of see it as, the question I have is, can it be phased? I'm not sure if it can or not be, so that we can get part of it built and then do the other part of it later. So I would say that at this point, it hasn't been implemented what happened out of the CAC process.
Okay.
Still, official policy is to go to 120th.
Right. Okay. That's the only question I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember. Deputy Mayor Noonhouse.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Shumane, for the presentation, Andrew, Paula as well. Great data and very thoughtful and well thought out in terms of your approach here. Agree and appreciate a lot of the comments already made by my colleagues, so I'll echo some of them here. But the 2nd Street option, I have to agree that doesn't quite meet the purpose of TFP 197 and the goal of facilitating that access to the 405. So it is a bit curious to me that would make your top 5 here moving forward. So I do have concerns about that. But what I don't have concerns about is your thoughtful multimodal approach. Really happy to see that you're prioritizing the pedestrian, walking, biking, riding transit, all very important things to be considered as part of this. As part of that tier 2 process, it does sound that you're taking into consideration the surrounding property owners, the competing projects or projects that we can integrate in, which have been discussed here a couple of times as well. Very important to be able to coordinate, be it WashDOT, city, private, no matter what it is, to make sure that we're fully aware of how we would integrate into any one of those said projects. Question regarding the community engagement and with the stakeholders. Would the tier 2 process look any different, or are you just going back to the same initial stakeholders that you approached or worked with initially? Maybe if you could speak to that a little bit, because certainly in tier 2 with more considerations and maybe getting into the weeds a little bit more, it would be great if you had a wider breadth of residents and stakeholders that you might be approaching and speaking to.
Shuming, I'm going to ask that you come back and answer that question at the end here with everybody else's. Did you have any other questions, Deputy Mayor?
No, I do not. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. So I think we've heard some really good comments. This is an adaptation to capacity. And, it's true we have, was it 25,000 jobs coming to Bellevue, but then again, there's a high percentage of those workers that will be taking transit or not driving. So it's hard to know exactly what the impact is going to be of that. And yet we have other construction going on in Bellevue outside of those 25,000 jobs. So I have no doubt that we will be bringing more people in and out of Bellevue. And how best we do it, and if we can encourage more safe multimodal travel is kind of my goal to see. So whatever decision we make, I want to make sure that it does encourage safe multimodal travel. I like the comment that it should not impact transit in any way. It should prioritize and maintain the ped bike program, and it should support our Vision Zero. And I like the concept of protecting our neighborhoods, because certainly when we don't manage our traffic well, that's where it spills into, and it makes it really dangerous for our communities. So I'm going to be very interested in seeing what your next recommendation is, keeping all the things in mind that the council has presented today. And I'm going to first ask Council Member Zahn if she has anything more that she wanted to add, since I kind of cut her off.
Mayor, I would say that my other colleagues have asked questions that include the other ones that I was thinking about. So thank you.
Okay. And so Shuming, I'm going to go ahead and let you answer some of the questions that you've heard tonight.
All right. The first question that's significant is has to do with the Southeast 6th Street extension inside connection to express tolling. This is a very good question. It's a very complex one. I'm going to defer to Barrett from Washington State DOT, that he's the design manager. So Barrett, would you help me answer this question?
Yeah, no problem. I think it's something we would definitely look at. Obviously, the Renton to Bellevue project is well underway and going through the design process. But if that was the option that came out, that was a preferred alternative, then it's definitely something we can look at to identify, is there any widening that wouldn't be needed? Or is it something that we think might be used for some construction staging, when this project were to go to build? So it's definitely something that can be considered if this was coming out of it as a preferred alternative.
Thank you.
So can I ask a question? What would the timing have to be in order to facilitate that? Because it is a design build, the design is underway.
Council members on, I'm going to go let them answer these questions, and we'll go through everybody again, okay?
Okay.
Great. The next question that I have is, but Northeast 10th Street that has been partially completed, why we even study the southern end if a decision has been made. And this, before I get started, I need to thank WashDOT for being flexible and really look to the city to say what works the best for the city. And in the 405 master plan, the initial location was identified at Northeast 2nd Street. And keep in mind that the plan was developed 18 years ago, and Bellevue has changed quite a bit from then. And now with the development that happened in the last 18 years and the planned development that to come, things have really changed. And this begs the question, what impact does it have? Do you have a better location than Northeast 2nd Street? So that's what this study is about, to figure that out. You know, what the northern end is pretty clear. The other half southbound off-ramp at the Northeast 10 is just waiting for funding. So I want to again thank WashDOT for great collaboration with the city, that working with us to identify the best option for the city. So with that, and Kyle, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think you summed it up well. The original plan had the connection at 2nd Street, but we always built into that master plan the appropriate flexibility as things change to take a step back and look at, is there a better spot for that access? And that's the exercise that we're in right now.
Thank you, Carl.
Okay, so I'm going to take it through, Shuming, if you're done, I will take it through the council members once again and let people ask any more questions or follow up. So starting with, and please, I remind you, keep it to 3 minutes, please. So Councilmember Robertson.
Thanks. No, good conversation. Very much. Just a couple of additional comments after listening to everyone speak. One, Vision Zero is listed in the packet. It wasn't on the PowerPoint, but it is listed on the packet. So number two, the stream and wetland impacts here, they're listed under cost consideration. I like them to be considered for more than just the cost, because we want to make sure that the Sturtevant Creek is right there. That's a fish-bearing stream. So it may cost more to do the mitigation, but I'd like to just avoid those if we can, because it's more than cost. Finally, just to clarify what I was saying about the land use, I think that the access to the south end, particularly on the east side, is going to be really important to unlocking Wilburton, which is one of the visions that we have that's going to bring a lot of housing as well as job centers to our city. So I think that that's really important. And then finally, as we all know, Main Street on-ramps and off-ramps are no longer on here. And I think that that's really good, because Main Street is going to be the ped bike connectivity corridor. And so not having cars getting on and off there will make that corridor that much safer by diverting that elsewhere. So really agree with a lot of the comments my colleagues have made about, you know, making sure that we have the transit accessibility, et cetera. And I'm looking forward to the study. Thank you guys all for your excellent work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, so my question about timing of when would we need to let WashDOT know if Southeast 2nd emerges as a strong option or a preferred option, so that the design can accommodate that right away for the ramps themselves.
Can I just make one point, is that the project's not funded, and so we're going to have to obtain the funding for it, and the timeline from that it remains to be seen. So the project isn't funded at this point.
Right, but if there's a way that the designer can look at the alignment so that what gets designed is not just going to get ripped out later when we do our project. You know, to me, the hardest thing is when you build something and then shortly thereafter it has to be rebuilt, that is just not a very good use of taxpayer money. So that's one of my comments there. And so I understand. And then to clarify on these options for the ped and bike network, is the intent that there would be ped and bike infrastructure for those options that are a crossing over 405 to build that network, or was the ped bike actually on other streets?
Included in the new alternative.
Okay, so it would actually help create that safer space for ped and bike crossing 405 then?
That's the goal.
Okay, okay. And then lastly, I'm not sure if we've done this when we've looked at our alternatives, but any environmental impact and really giving that a score in terms of that criteria to better understand amongst the options, what are those long and short-term impacts related to our environment, especially related to, we have our ESI and our transportation infrastructure, certainly some of those components.
Yes, we will look at those.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Lee. Councilmember Lee. I will come back to Councilmember Lee. Councilmember Stokes.
Thank you. My question is on Northeast 2nd Street extension to Wilburton. The same question Deputy Mayor asked. It doesn't connect to, I-405.
That's in the second, the tier 2 evaluation. That's what we're going to look at.
Yeah. Was it because? Well, maybe I make the assumption. I shouldn't ask that. Is it because that was the first potential alternative that was looked at way back when the master plan was agreed on? Otherwise, why would that be? Why would that make the cut as the alternative?
It increased connectivity between Wilburton and downtown. It has not only vehicle, but also
not access to
connection.
Right, it could be, no, sorry.
Yeah, I hope the numbers we show probably not going to be as, effective, right? Because it doesn't get onto 405.
Yeah, I think the confusion is that this is an I-405 study and an option that doesn't include a connection to or from I-405 is what we're questioning.
Right.
Yes.
It's intended to be combined with other alternatives. So I don't see it being a standalone project. You could connect it with the Lake Hills on-ramp or one of the other alternatives that we're looking at.
If that's the case, then we should identify what's that alternative connection, right? We cannot make the decision in that vacuum.
Right.
That's my concern. So I think that is confusing to me, okay? So it just doesn't make the sense. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Stokes?
Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing, looking at Northeast 2nd. I think that is, it just seems to be a little different here. So I'm not sure we need to waste a lot of time on that one. My only other comment I wanted to make, or just emphasize, and I appreciated Councilmember Robertson's mentioning this and a couple other comments, the ecological aspects of any of this coming around Sturtevant Creek and coming down to the connector and that area and the park there's just a lot there to take into account. And actually the neighborhoods there are pretty kind of freaked out about the Sound Transit coming as well. So I think that's something we really have to take into account. And I think we can do that, but it's a lot more difficult to put a ramp in this area than it was in the north side. We cut down a lot of trees, but there were just buildings there. It's not the same. So that's a big concern. So I hope that that's one of the primary objectives in this, is to do this in a very sound ecological manner, because that is really important to us. As we grow bigger, we have to really pay more attention to those factors. Otherwise, I think it's really good and look forward to seeing the progress on this. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Barksdale.
All right, thank you. No further questions, but I do support moving forward with 4 alternatives along with the status quo. I will say that the Northeast Second does provide some connectivity to transit, so I would like to keep it and consider how that ties in with the other alternatives and look forward to a preferred alternative. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor Newhouse.
Yeah, again, great conversation, a lot of great questions, and appreciate my colleagues' comments here. My first question wasn't addressed, however, about Tier 2, the community outreach and stakeholder conversations. How is that going to look different in Tier 2 compared to Tier 1? And then the second part of this question will be, during the Tier 1 process, did you already see stakeholders and community members gravitating to one of the options already?
Thank you. Yeah, I do have to note that to answer your question.
Thank you.
And in the second tier, we're going to engage the same for the stakeholders. We're going to engage the same group for continuity. And also, and identify these people, we have anticipated all the potential and business owners, the residents could be directly impacted by one or more of the options that we are studying. So, I'm sorry, just blanked out. On the second part of your question is?
My second part was that during Tier 1, were some of the stakeholders or community members already gravitating to one of the options?
Oh yeah, and they obviously, each alternative has a preference, but overall, yes, they like the alternative on the southern side of the study area than the northern side.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and I have no further questions or comments. Shuming, Andrew, Paula, Barrett, Carl, thank you very much for your presentation and your time tonight. And we look forward to having you bring these back with your assessments. I think I would actually like to do a vote on this. So Deputy Mayor, can you make a motion on option number 1, please?
Certainly, Mayor. I move to direct staff to proceed with the South Downtown I-405 access study by evaluating the 5 remaining options as proposed by staff.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, you got it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Miyake, would you like to introduce the second study session item?
Sure, thank you, Mayor. This next study session item is one that has been, the council has been waiting patiently for, and that's the City of Bellevue cross-cultural feasibility study. Just by way of background, for several years, the council has led the journey in promoting a welcoming and inclusive community. And a significant step in that direction occurred when the council adopted the Diversity Advantage Plan back in 2014, which includes recommendations to invest in third places for community connection and to increase opportunities for cultural interaction and education. In 2018, the city conducted a cross-cultural programming public outreach study. And as a result of that work, council directed staff to conduct a feasibility study that focused on potential programming options, review of available spaces, and a review of available spaces already existent. Tonight's presentation is intended to share the findings of that study. This item was last brought before council on May 6th of 2019, and at that meeting, council directed staff to conduct a feasibility study that explored potential programming for a multicultural facility and to review available space in Bellevue, including city-owned and potential partners. Tonight, we're seeking council feedback and questions, which will help inform the final report to be developed and published by the consultants. So joining us this evening is Kyle Stanton, our Assistant City Manager, and Yoriana Garcia Tellez from our Diversity, Inclusion, and Outreach group, and both from the City Manager's office. We also have some additional guests, Linda Chu, Vice President, and Linda Abe, Urban Design Principal of AECOM, who did the report this evening. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Kyle, for the presentation.
Thank you, City Manager, and good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Newenhouse, and members of the City Council. My comments will be brief. Brad gave a very comprehensive introduction, but before I turn it over to Yuriana to fill in a few more details about the background and reorient us to this study, I actually wanted to start off a word of thanks, both to staff, including Yuriana and the team that she had supporting her, as well as our consultants. Just for a bit of context, we were here in front of you back in May of last year and got direction on how to move forward. And that led to an RFP, which then led to a second RFP to find the right consultants, which I'm convinced we did. All of that means that our kickoff for this project happened the middle of March. And if you can remember what life was like in the middle of March, we were just getting used to seeing each other on screen more and more. And I remember at the time thinking, well, yeah, we'll press forward on this project and it'll probably be hard for the first month, but we'll be back in business. Instead, I just want to acknowledge the fact that the people you're going to hear from tonight have really fought through some challenges, including trying to find information around public gathering spaces when many of them were closed and data was hard to find. But we really wanted to make sure that we had good data to inform some options and to start framing how this project would work forward. And the team really delivered. So again, a big word of thanks just right out of the gate. As Brad noted, tonight's presentation is for information only. The consultants have met with a number of stakeholders. Now they want to hear from you tonight. Our conversation tonight will help inform the finalization of a final draft. You've seen the executive summary in your packet. And also, I'm hoping that the conversation will just further refine down into how some of the big picture thinking around what a cross-cultural center could be for Bellevue. It'll give us an even better picture of where we're going. So with that, let me turn it over to Yuriana, and then we will be underway.
Thank you, Kyle. Good evening, Mayor Lynn Robinson, Deputy Mayor Newenhouse, and City Council members. It is really an honor to be here today and leading this project. As mentioned, we had quite an interesting start, but just to provide some brief background and context for the study, the first phase was a cross-cultural programming public outreach study. And that was presented back in May 2019. It looked at community values, concerns, and aspirations. And so from there, we had council approve a phase 2 of the study, which includes in scope supply and demand analysis, assessment of current public and private gathering spaces, the exploration of a cross-cultural facility in Bellevue. I don't have much other to say other than the consultants have done a really amazing job and have taken the study further than what we imagined. And so I'd like to introduce Linda Chu, who's Vice President of Economics and also lead on the study, who will be presenting tonight.
Ms. Chu, your mic is muted.
Thank you. Thank you, Yuriana, and good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Newenhouse, council members, City Manager Miyake. I feel very privileged to be here, and this report, this assignment truly was a pleasure for us to work on. We work on a lot of studies around the country, and both the quality of the staff that we interacted with in the city of Bellevue and community members was just, really second to none, and such a project that has so much need at this point. So I'm going to take you through some key findings and kind of a summary of our research. And I also wanted to just quickly introduce Linda Abe, who is our urban designer on this. So she handled the physical planning, I handled the economics. Just a quick introduction to AECOM, or at least our little tiny part of AECOM, because a lot of people think of AECOM as an engineering firm. We are an integrated multidisciplinary firm. The group that I work in, the economics practice, actually came from a group called Economics Research Associates, or ERA, over 65 years ago. We have a very specialized practice focusing on cultural and community facilities with really deep experience working on projects with some kind of a cultural diversity or equity focus. We view our challenge as really helping policymakers measure trade-offs in mission versus money, and really thinking towards building sustainable facilities, because we know that public agencies have a lot of risk when it comes to public facilities, especially cultural facilities. And, you know, we've worked on a number of projects even recently that I think are very topical, like the GLBT Historical Society, the Dallas Asian American Cultural Center, the Mexican Museum, the National Center for Civil and Human Rights, several Chinatown economic development strategies in other ethnic districts. We've also worked locally on the Space Needle expansion, Chihuly, Kiarina, and Linda Abe has done quite a bit of planning work in the area as well, both for Bellevue and kind of around the area, working on the Microsoft campus. So I just wanted to go through kind of, you know, what we did as part of this. You know, we really were kind of looking at 4 major questions. So the first one is, you know, really, what is a cross-cultural center and why is it needed? And so we did a whole bunch of work that we consider that sort of demand analysis. And so part of that is we reviewed studies, we did a lot of demographic and economic analysis, we conducted stakeholder interviews, and we developed a program that we can use for analysis. And then, you know, the second question is, you know, what facilities are currently used for cross-cultural activities? We might consider that a supply analysis. So really looking at kind of what's out there in the market, what does the sort of both competitive and maybe complementary environment look like? And then we looked at, you know, what site opportunities might be possible. So first, we identified site evaluation criteria, very broad brush at this stage, and then looked at, you know, possible public and private sites, and then did a broad evaluation of these sites by criteria. And last, you know, we looked at, you know, how is this thing going to work? What is the operating model? What is the financial model? How can it get developed? And so I'm going to go through all that right now, quickly. So what is a cross-cultural facility? I think it's really important to get some terminology to just kind of be on the same page and have some consistent terminology and context. So really, I think a cross-cultural center, you know, has some element of all of these. So you're very familiar with your community centers that are city-run. You know, they typically offer a mix of community programs and classes and recreation as well. The facilities themselves have multi-purpose spaces, gyms, classrooms, studios, sometimes much more specialized recreational kinds of facilities, but those are community centers. And then performing arts centers, I think we all understand what those are. They're typically city-owned. They can be city or nonprofit operated. You know, oftentimes they involve fixed seats, although there can be smaller kind of black box theaters as well and exhibit areas. Cultural centers, you know, when you look at those, they are typically run by nonprofit organizations. They have a mission statement, a very strong mission statement, mission-driven. They're typically, you know, probably 95% of cultural centers nationally are really focused on the experience of one group defined by race, ethnicity, gender identity, sexual orientation, or another characteristic. They're, you know, and they typically have performance, multi-purpose space, classrooms, and exhibits. And so then we get to kind of the term cross-cultural, multicultural centers. And we had actually, you know, I don't think we've ever done a study specifically for a cross-cultural center. So we really wanted to understand where the terminology came from. It actually comes from the college campus context. Very, very common on all sorts of college campuses, including community colleges and universities. And but it's not very common outside of this. And typically, you know, there are, of course, many organizations that provide multicultural programming, and this is part of their mission statement, but they're rarely tied to a facility. So that just helps us when we're thinking about our benchmarking and some of our kind of examples. So we did, you know, we looked at the demographics and economic factors in Bellevue, and just some kind of key takeaway points. Bellevue, you know, I think this is part of the need, has an increasingly diverse population. You know, the largest majority minority population in Washington, an increasing percentage of foreign-born residents. The younger age demographic is more diverse, and even within racial groups, there's significant diversity. You know, you have some factors that are very favorable for any kind of cultural attraction or cultural facility. And so when you think about age, income, and education, typically higher income and education levels are associated with greater participation, attendance, and financial support, of course, for cultural facilities. So that is very favorable, as your income and education levels are, you know, much higher relative to the region and state and nationally. And then, you know, there's some good positive economic trends as well. You have a strong economy, I think it was discussed today, fueled by kind of major technology companies and some Seattle companies moving over. You have the workforce that is interested in kind of a downtown residential. And so these provide opportunities. Also, we know that retail is going to face some actually pre and post-COVID challenges. And while that is certainly, can be challenging, cultural facilities have long been known for their economic impacts and ability to support retail. And also, increasingly, we're seeing a lot of shopping centers looking for cultural anchors now to help support their retail. So we also looked at a lot of the planning work that you've done. You've done a significant amount of planning work, probably more than we see in most cities, and really across all sorts of areas, right? From parks and open space planning with really solid sort of analysis, looking at population growth and kind of needs and using ratios and such, to art studies and to everything else. And of course, then there was a study that was the first phase of our work. And I just wanted to summarize some of the key findings from that study. So in that outreach study, 86% of people felt that Bellevue needs a multicultural community center. People wanted it to be a place for people outside of their ethnic or cultural community to understand values, customs, arts, culture, history. A goal really around kind of increasing knowledge and awareness, particularly with historically underrepresented communities. And a significant interest in retaining control of programming, of course, while wanting support from the city. 66, 2/3 of people thought that there should be kind of an arts performance and practice space component to this. But many other people also talked about multi-generational activities, gathering space, festivals, diversity. We're very careful when we sort of read these surveys, because while arts and performance and practice space is something specific, we always point out that multi-generational activities can actually be a park, a library, or even an aquatic center. So it's not as specific, but certainly we think there are important indicators from the study. Other studies also I think had relevant findings for ours. The City Parks and Open Space Plan identified a need for another community center with a recommendation of downtown, showing some demand there. Bellevue residents and some other studies were documented as having a strong interest in the arts and culture, and raising awareness for diverse communities was identified as part of the creative sector strategy. So we talked to over 40 stakeholder interviews as part of our work. We conducted over 40 stakeholder interviews with a mix of Bellevue staff, nonprofits, school district, cultural groups, religious organizations, disability organizations, and all kinds of community members. Very different opinions and also level of awareness about this effort. But generally speaking, we found there was strong interest and enthusiasm for a center focused on diversity and equity issues. There were many different visions expressed. So some people thought it should be a performing arts space. Other people really focused on just kind of the community center aspect of it. And other people also had different visions, nonprofit social services and such. But there was significant alignment around the value of a separately branded facility rather than integrating into the existing community centers. And that was a question that we were specifically asked to address. There was also alignment around the idea of a mission-driven organization with a cross-cultural focus, so not just something where different groups from individual communities come and perform or put on programming, but really where different groups are interacting. Something that would produce its own programming in addition to supporting other organizations' programming, and something that was really designed and operated as intentionally welcome to all people and communities, not just accessible through special accommodations, and a lot of discussion about the need for experienced staff with the appropriate expertise. And there was a lot of interest in partnering or utilizing a cross-cultural center. I think it's very hard to do a specific demand analysis without a site, because demand is always tied to site. So that would be kind of a next step. So how does all of our research translate to a building program? We developed, what we call an illustrative program, which allows us to move forward with kind of site analysis and financial analysis. We think that the individual program elements may vary as time goes on and as your planning goes on. It's certainly kind of an iterative process with site, physical planning characteristics, and demand analysis. But we think this is certainly kind of a reasonable footprint to plan for. And that footprint is about 20 to 30,000 square feet with a midpoint of 25,000. Some of the key program elements include multi-purpose spaces, everything from smaller classrooms to large event spaces and everything in between. One thing that really came out that's different than a typical community center is people are really interested in kind of a signature exhibit, either in some kind of an immersive or multimedia-based exhibit or experience that would engage people in the history of diverse communities in Bellevue. And there are a lot of examples of that that we could talk about in the Q&A if you wanted to, but I think that would be a differentiating factor, that it wouldn't just be something where people are putting on programming, but there actually would be something that's kind of fixed there for people to see. And then performing arts space. And I think this is something we have included in the program, but we do feel it's something that should be examined in the context of performing arts needs in Bellevue, because there are some other efforts ongoing. And then amenities, right, such as a kitchen, shared working space. One of the things that we get asked, and we've gotten asked, I think, a few times in each presentation, is what about the current COVID context? Here we are in the middle of a time when no one can actually be in person, where actually, large community gatherings are sort of probably going to be the last thing to come back. What we think is that this is actually a good time to plan. We've actually done some work for cultural attractions, looking at benchmarking on what happens after major, actually pandemics, epidemics, and other kinds of disruptive events. And what we have found is that there is a significant demand that comes back. It does come back pretty quickly, and you can actually see that happening kind of around the country as well. And there is demand for kind of high touch, in addition to the high tech experiences that we're all getting very used to. And certainly with kind of the increasing polarization nationally, a need for shared experiences that can help to build mutual understanding. So what exists in the market today? You have the Bellevue city-owned and operated community centers. And then there are a number of other kind of public and private facilities as well. And I'm going to go through these quickly. The thing I will say about some of these other facilities in kind of the bottom row here is that many of these have a purpose, other than cross-cultural activities and programming. And they certainly can be used, and they always are. In every market study we ever do, there are always churches and school auditoriums that are used as kind of low-cost facilities to hold programming. However, they have many shortcomings and limitations simply because that is not their major mission. They typically have many constraints around usage, and they are not always places that all groups would feel welcome and comfortable. There are also a number of proposed facilities that we looked at, which we again think it would be very important to coordinate kind of the efforts of some of these future facilities. So we did do some research on the existing usage, utilization, programming, and financial performance and size of this Bellevue community centers. They are, I will say, they're very well run. I think it's a strength. They are very highly utilized. And when you see Crossroads at 85%, we don't see 85% utilization in almost anything. That's almost impossible. High utilization is like 60% in most facilities, just because you can't use it all times of day. So I think they do very well. By the way, we were really impressed by the level of data that the city staff were able to put together on these. And from a revenue perspective, they have cost recovery somewhere between kind of 30 and 40% for the most part. And they all range, except for the Northwest Arts Center, which is a little bit different, between about 15 and 30,000 square feet. Our sense is, though, they are very busy. They also, of course, have a focus on recreation as the city's park and recreation facilities. So they do have another purpose. So then we looked at site, now that we had kind of a program and a footprint. And we think, some of the most important criteria are, one, accessible to a sound transit station, to maximize accessibility, really leverage the investment into light rail and integrate with TOD efforts. We think the ability to both leverage and support other community and economic development goals and investments is very, very important. So again, critical mass is something a theme you'll see over and over again in the success factors for cultural facilities. Site area needs to be sufficient to accommodate the facility and parking, unless parking is provided off-site somewhere else. Complementary surrounding uses, again, we really do look for kind of a critical mass of activity. So restaurants, retail, active parks, just other community nodes of activity are very important. Programmable outdoor space is something that is very much in keeping with kind of current trends. And then just, visibility and being centrally located. We do not think that architecture is important typically. We always say build a building from the inside out. And so we looked at a number of site opportunities in downtown, in Wilburton, in Bellred, and then in some other areas. And, we can discuss those further. But, we think there are opportunities in all of those areas. It depends, I think, how some of the plans progress. And then we looked at the financial model. So really, what is the financial model for a cross-cultural facility? So we developed a hypothetical pro forma, and we think, for planning purposes at this stage, which is really kind of feasibility, pre-feasibility, this is a reasonable budget. I will say they can be higher, but we think this is reasonable for planning purposes. And they can vary based upon specific visitor experiences, programming, the operating and governance model, the location, other kinds of physical characteristics, and then mission-related decisions about equity or affordability. Sometimes cities make choices to cap the earned revenue that they'll get for mission purposes. So, but typically, an operating budget for something of this size would be around 1.2 million or so. The facility should be able to generate, given our research, somewhere around 35% earned income, 30 to 40%, with resulting earned income of 465,000 and a required contributed income of 770,000 or so. Call it 700 to 800,000. Now that is something that can come from, city subsidy, or it can come from foundations, corporations, individual contributors. It really depends on the model. So what are our possible operating models? We've seen everything from city-run, city-owned and operated, to a hybrid model where the city typically owns it and maybe has some role in operations, governance, or funding. But there's a nonprofit organization that also is managing and usually providing programming to nonprofit operated. Now, all of these have strengths and challenges, and we've gone through these. I think you've had this in your packet, so I'm happy to address any of these kind of specific models in more detail in the Q&A if you'd like to. But generally speaking, the city's risk sort of varies. I will say, even in the nonprofit model, the city has risk. And the study we don't want to do is the one where you're coming back to us to ask what didn't work and how, why something's not working. So it is important to really look at the metrics up front. And then there's a lot of development models as well for cross-cultural facilities, for cultural attractions. And everything from just publicly financing it and developing it. I mean, that is very straightforward, although it certainly, puts, again, the brunt of the financing on the city. And sometimes you don't have as much community ownership. And then you have kind of the community nonprofit developed, which, the city may contribute a little bit to, but typically the onus at that point is on the nonprofit. There are challenges there, and those can be very, very lengthy and often, tie up land for long periods of time. Public-private joint development is something, and we have to be careful when we talk about public-private development and partnerships. There is not extra revenue in a cultural facility model, right? So there's not like an upstream revenue that comes later on or anything. And so basically, when we say public-private, it's typically a nonprofit involved. Sometimes there's corporate dollars, there's a foundation, sometimes. Occasionally there can be a private developer that provides the space, the shell, and then the city comes in and provides some funding and a nonprofit comes in. That can happen too. It can be complex. And then there is, a rental model too, where you just rent space. Again, we are seeing that happen sometimes now with shopping centers that are really looking for different kinds of anchors that will attract people to support their retail. And so, key findings, this basically highlights kind of everything I've talked about. I think the key points are, there is some, strong interest and enthusiasm, and I would say there is demand. we think that a reasonable program is 20 to 30,000 square feet. You know, the key physical area that would be different would be some kind of a multimedia visitor experience that talks about the story of Bellevue communities. I will add that adds a cost, and that is kind of a separate cost from building a facility and from typical kind of FF&E. And then, you know, where we think there's a number of sites, but we are pretty clear about some of the criteria. And then, you know, again, financial model, somewhere between 1 and 1.5 million, 30 to 40% earned revenue, requiring an annual subsidy of 700 to 800,000, with, you know, multiple operating models and development models. You know, what else? The other things that we really noticed were, we think this project needs some proponents and champions, and a small kind of organizing group of leaders that represent the city, community stakeholders, and the corporate sector. A small group that can really sort of be the decision-making body for this, engage the community, and help kind of move this forward. We also noticed, you know, there is a need for public support for capacity building for nonprofit cultural organizations in Bellevue. It's quite common, actually. We've seen it a lot lately, where nonprofit organizations and cultural organizations are starting to grow in, you know, outside of what was traditionally kind of the large city. And so with, you know, with all the employment, and as we see employment start to grow into what were previously suburban communities, we also see demand for cultural facilities. And with that comes a need for additional capacity building for some of these organizations. And sometimes that lags behind, that's very common. And then, you know, finally, there are many developments and planning efforts that we came across as we did our study that we think provide some opportunities, but definitely would require a different level of coordination. So thank you.
And with that, thank you very much, Linda. And again, reflects all your great work. Mayor, we're completed with our presentation. I would just reiterate again our ask tonight. This was for information only, no decisions coming out of tonight, but the feedback and guidance will be helpful as we finish up the report. And certainly if there's any questions that would help in that feedback, we will do our best to answer.
Okay, thank you so much. Great presentation. So I'll ask in this order: Councilmember Lee, Barksdale, Deputy Mayor Newenhouse, Councilmember Stokes, Robertson, Zahn, and then me. And if we can keep our comments to 3 minutes, that would be great. Let's start with Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a great presentation. Even though, you know, we had some roadblocks along the way, it's taken a few years, and but I'm very impressed, and surprisingly so. In a short time of mid-March to now, they have produced a great report, and this, I think, also kudos for the city staff that are able to work with the consultant, providing the support information and the background. So this is very impressive. You know, I don't have the time in 3 minutes to go into all the specifics, but just in general, it's beyond my expectations, since, you know, it hasn't really been moving along that fast. So especially after listening to the presentation today by Linda Chu. She added a lot more specific information and insight in, you know, in this project. And I think, you know, given the short time they did, interviewing 40 stakeholders, you know, I think it's still very limited in terms of specific understanding what can be done, what is the potential. But I think she laid out a myriad of possibilities. So what we're going to do really depends on more information. She's laid out a great framework, a great framework. And I think we just need to be serious about it. I think we just heard it's proven, I think she has, the study proven that 86% of people support this. And I believe it is there. So the question is, how are we going to put more information, more flesh on the bones, so that we can start looking at some of the realities, the real alternatives, possibilities. And I was surprised too that, you know, not many cities around the country or organizations that have similar kind of so-called cross-culture. The key word to me, it's very important. That shows their understanding of what the mission is, the goal is capacity building. It's bringing people of different cultures together, being unified, being working together. COVID-19 really demonstrated the need of us working together. I mean, I heard the word polarization included in one of the piece of presentation, and we want to overcome that. We have a great community. Bellevue people are in position. We can make that happen. So I hope that it gives us, the council, a real piece of foundation, basis to have something we can bite on, we can discuss, and we can take it for real and move forward. Otherwise, we wasted a wonderful piece of work. So I hope that after our conversation, we, the City Council, can take this as an opportunity to do the next step, to continue to moving forward, continue to have people like ACON, consultants and others to give us more information, more realistic and substance that we can work out. Because I believe the partners, I don't know what all the 40 stakeholders, but I believe she mentioned businesses, developers, individuals, all the people that are, I think, part and parcel of what's going to make Bellevue great, understand this, and they will be happy and willing. As long as we know.
Thank you, Councilmember Lee.
Okay, so I'm going to stop here and we'll talk about that.
Okay, I'll get back. I'll come back to you.
Okay, thanks.
Councilmember Barksdale.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Thanks to staff and contract consultants for the great work that you all did. Appreciate the work. I think there are a lot of benefits to having a multicultural center. I guess I'm curious, how does this complement or sit relative to having more distributed cultural spaces throughout the city?
That's a great question, and I think there's a good strategic question in that too. Is as we invest, how do we want it to be? And I think there's some within the range of options presented that might speak to some of the potential partnerships. Of is there an ability to partner with groups that could help spread out things? But I think the heart of this too is still getting to that idea of how much of it is programming and how much of it is the space, and trying to bring those two things together. So I think that is an absolutely great question as we look at the distribution of where are the opportunities to have cross-cultural events across the city. We should look at that and also leverage where are realizing we still do have some existing spaces that may not fully enable for us to just plug and play with programming, but what could we do that kind of helps support or augment what's already in existing too?
Yeah, absolutely. Just want to make sure that folks have access. We often talk about the 15-minute city, right? So everything is sort of within that 15 minutes from where you are. So I like this idea. I'd like to also think about how we can spread this out throughout the city as well.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Nunhaus.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councilmember Lee, for championing this. Clearly, there is a desire and an initial interest for such a center, and I appreciate Councilmember Lee pushing this along and his enthusiasm for such a center. Also want to thank the consultants here, both the Lindas and Ariana. Thank you for this great presentation. I wanted to hone in, Linda, on one thing that you had mentioned excuse me if I got it wrong, but I think you said you had not worked on a project specifically for a cross-cultural center. So on your expertise or experience, so are there cross-cultural centers like what we're talking about here? Are there many across the country? And if so, what does it look like in terms of success and the types of programs that they have? And then the second part of it is, is there more, it sounds like there's more groups, or not groups per se, but more centers that are more specific in terms of, I think, again, one of your examples of an Asian American cultural center or a Chinese American cultural center. So if you could speak to that a little bit, that would be great.
Sure. Kyle, should I just go ahead and, okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. You're right. So I don't, and I was trying to think, I don't think we've ever quite done something like this where the intent is really to be cross-cultural. And I think, what that means is a couple things. One is you still have plenty of benchmarks to look at in terms of, some of the operational and financial characteristics, right? I think cultural centers still kind of, and cultural attractions, I will say, cultural facilities of all types operate very similarly in terms of financial profile, business model, and there's actually a wide range, and we've looked at a lot of those. I do think it's interesting, as I mentioned, where you see a lot of multicultural centers and cross-cultural centers is really on college campuses. The University of Washington has one, for example.
Okay.
And so you really see it there. I think what it means is that there is an additional challenge of getting a number of groups to work together. Now that happens anyway with cultural centers, performing arts centers, even museums. Yeah. That happens anyway, right? Trying to coordinate 7 different resident tenants, right, for performing arts center. But I think what it means is that there's some work to do in terms of building a sense of ownership and stakeholders for this, because I think the community needs to see it as its own, right? But I think, there is, and it needs to have a very clear mission statement.
Very good. Very good. Thank you for that. And also just touching at your expertise here again, because on the presentation, there's a lot of overlapping programming that other facilities or other groups do as well. So in your experience from what you've seen in other cities, does that like enhance the overall, let's say performing arts, for example, does that enhance the overall performing arts options for a city, and we see all boats rise, or is there some cannibalization in terms of going forward where one group kind of rises to the top and then that gets all the focus, and then unfortunately these other groups lag in terms of interest and success?
That's a big question, but it's probably a little bit of both, to be honest. Okay. And I think that a nice new facility with great space can do a lot to help other cultural organizations and nonprofits build up their audiences, develop their audiences, develop earned revenue, and become more stable. On the other hand, this new nonprofit will also take funding and require funding, and may be competing with some of the same foundations and corporations, for funding. But I like to think, it is a big pie of funding, even though, it seems like it's been dwindling during COVID, but, there is funding available. And I think, generally speaking, these sorts of projects can actually, I think, support other kinds of cultural facilities, cultural organizations in their development.
Great report. Thank you.
All right. Councilmember Stokes.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is really, really fascinating and amazing how much you put together in the time period. Couple of questions. One, on the 86% approve of this, what's the number of people that were involved in this? In other words, how many people make up the 86%? Was this a broad group or just the 40 different contacts?
No,
just trying to get a sense of where we're going on this.
Yuriana, do you know the answer to that?
I could go ahead and cover this question. This is from the first phase of the study, and we had 443 participants participate in a survey. And additionally, we had over 120 community members come together in a community forum to make up that 86%.
Yeah, that's great. Okay.
It's a statistically valid survey.
Yeah, that's good. The other thing is we've been talking about this for some time, back and forth. I noticed that when you began this, you talked about cross-cultural facilities with an S, and you seem to have, as you've gone through this, focused on one building or one place to some extent. But I noticed on page 18 or 16 of your report, you talk about some of the existing supply and facilities and all, and there are quite a number here. And you also talk about, well, performing arts meeting facilities and all, there are 5, 6 there, and then churches, schools and all. And then you propose your future facilities. You have PACE, the City Aquatic Center we're working on, and the Playhouse at Cloudview Development, which is a smaller facility. And I'll talk about that in a minute, comment. But I hope that you're not just focusing on building a building, one building somewhere in Bellevue. And we've talked about this a lot. And one of the things we're finding in looking at, and I'm the liaison for the Arts Commission and have been working on and supporting PACE for a long time. And I think that's run its course. I'm not sure what's going to happen to that, but we do have, I think, some ideas and ways of approaching things that are a little more exciting than building a icon building or a place. And that also means everybody has to go to that one place. The concept then is to have multiple centers. And we do have an organization in Bellevue that is engaged now called easthub.org. And we actually are working with them and the people in the city, with Ray Cullum as the executive director, and worked with PACE originally. And I think they are working, they're the ones who are actually working with the Playhouse at Cloudview to operate that. And I would hope you would take a look at this as how do we actually encourage and have larger and smaller places, because our community is it's growing, and actually anything we do here tends to be a regional facility as well. So you're going to bring people in, you know, the boundaries are pretty artificial. So it's not just Bellevue. And the other factor, and I'd like, you know, to look at that and take that into account, and that's something already happening. And there is the other factor of competition. PACE, the Performing Arts Center East Side, is still working on building their, orchestra and facility and everything. And the Aquatic Center is something we're working on. That's a big piece. There are other, and there are parks and recreation facilities. There are places that we don't have them. So there are a lot of competing things out
Stokes, can you wrap up, please, and I'll come back to you?
Yeah. I would like to come back. I'll stop here, but I want to talk a little bit about the next steps of this and see if we can have some ideas on that.
Councilmember Robertson.
I agree with a lot of what Councilmember Stokes said. We do have and want to have all of our public facilities host events from all different. I mean, I've been to the North Bellevue Community Center for Garba, which is an Indian dance. We have Holi down in the downtown park, the Ukrainian festival. I mean, we have a lot of things everywhere, but it doesn't mean that we don't want them also to have a home base and then satellite elsewhere. So I love the idea of the cross-cultural center, because we are a cross-cultural city. So, and I also want to echo Councilmember Neuenhouse, thanks to Councilmember Lee, because Conrad, you've been pushing this for a long time, and we're getting there. So thank you for your steadfast support. I'm really excited about this. So I have a couple of questions and then some comments. So first, I know that your report said that we are short one community center. However, when I joined the council in 2009, we were short one community center, and we had 120,000 people then. We have 150,000 people now. So I think we're probably short 2 community centers. So what is the actual number for level of service for community centers that Bellevue has set as our goal?
I think this is one of the times where, by having diversity lead this effort, we're going to have to follow up with you on that for an answer. We need to talk to Parks and let them share their expertise on that question. It's a good question to ask.
Yeah, we had 5 in 2009, and we still have 5, and we've added. I think it's about 20,000 people per. And so I think we probably almost need 2 more community centers. And if we do the aquatic center, that is a type of community center. This is another type of community center. So my questions, and I don't know, this can be answered in the final report, is whether this would be something that would be appropriately combined, with another type of city facility, like an aquatic center or whatnot, or we expand the arts center up, in North Bellevue. Secondly, I definitely think we need to be looking at city-owned property for this. To me, the two that jump out at me most is the Lincoln Center site on 116th and Ashwood Park. Ashwood Park has been planned for a community center for a long time. I'm not Parks Board liaison anymore, but I know that we're going to be redoing that master plan. That might be an excellent location. It's right nestled in there between the King County Main Library and Kids Quest Museum. So it could be an excellent location with a lot, bringing a lot of activity that's good activity to that area. Finally, since Wilburton is one of the areas that we're thinking about this is more for my council colleagues. We might want to think about having an incentive when we update the land use code in Wilburton for a multicultural or cross-cultural center as something that we could get a super bonus for. That would be another way to do it, where it can go on private property with a public purpose. We've had really great success with public-private partnerships in the past, and this could be an opportunity for another one. Thanks.
Great feedback. Thank you.
Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'm super excited about this as well. So thank you, Yuriana, Linda, and Linda for this amazing report in such a short period of time. And I thank Councilmember Lee for his diligence to keep pushing on this. And the thing that struck me the most was what you said about space for shared immersive experience, and also a place that's welcoming to all people. Because I do think that those are some really important vision and pillars that we have in our city. And so as we look at this model, and I also agree with my fellow council members about, really it's not just this one place, right? That we do have this hub and spoke, and it should be throughout the city. Because while I agree with the fact that we should look at our city-owned property because that's the easiest to obtain, I'm also struck by when I look at the map, between South Bellevue Community Center and Crossroads, there's nothing. So there's a whole community that does not have a community center. So as we look at this, I know that we're looking at Bellevue College potentially for the aquatic center, but maybe that's also a place we could look at for a multicultural center. But I guess what I'm saying is, while I understand and appreciate citing something on the transit, I'm also struck by when I look at the map where the desert is from the standpoint of a community center as well. So maybe not for this, but we need to then holistically think about how to make sure that the East Bellevue community also has a community gathering place. And I would say when I think about partnerships, I also think about Eastside for All has had the concept of a third space that's a welcoming multicultural space. So I think that they would be a really good partner to us, perhaps as a thought partner or a space where we could leverage their outreach into our community-based organizations for input and stakeholder gathering. So if you haven't connected with Eastside for All, I think they're a really good space for this. The other one that I was also thinking about is you brought up economic development. So I do think that having this cross-cultural center potentially is a thought for that. I guess what I'd like to see, and perhaps it's a follow-up, is I understand there's not a lot of cities that have these, but there are some examples. So if it would be helpful just to get a sense for what are some of these examples. And also I understand that on the capital cost, you can't give us too much precision, but if you could give us at least some idea of ranges. So I know UW has one, Western Washington University just finished their multicultural center last year. WSU has a cultural center. And so maybe it's the college campuses that have them and not cities, but I think it would be helpful to get a little more visual about some examples and ideas that can help spur perhaps our thinking. And then I would say lastly, I really like the idea that we're looking both at an indoor space for different uses as well as an outdoor activation space, because I do think that oftentimes we don't have quite enough green space in some areas of our community. So the idea that a multicultural, cross-cultural experience can also be felt outside and not just physically inside of a building, I think might be really important. Maybe an amphitheater outdoors, I don't know. Anyway, thank you.
Very good, thank you.
Hey, so I have a few comments myself. First, I want to thank Councilmember Lee because he's really the catalyst for this conversation as far as I know. When I first came on the council 7.5 years ago, he was beating the drum to this idea. And it took a while for us all to kind of catch on to the value of what he was discussing. And it's just becoming more and more evident to me how important it is to have this type of a facility in Bellevue. I think that, you know, we're talking about connecting people, and I can't think of a better place to have a connection center than on the Grand Connection. So I would love to see it connected somehow, either in the Lincoln building or is it the Metro property that's right here at City Hall? Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of great options that kind of fit the need, the criteria that was outlined here, but is also part of the Grand Connection. Let's see, I wrote a lot of things down. Oh, I think that one of the things I love about this is raising awareness of cultures. That is really intriguing to me. And I like that, the purpose of that. And also being able to talk about Bellevue's cultural history. I mean, we really have an amazing cultural history way back to the Native Americans in Maidenbower Bay. And I would love to know more about it myself. And I'd love everybody to have access to that information more easily. You talk about the fact that you haven't done many cross-cultural or multicultural studies like this. And I think that Bellevue is super unique, and you outline how unique Bellevue is in the beginning of your presentation, one of the largest majority minority populations in Washington, increasing foreign-born residents, significant diversity within the racial groups. And also we have one of the top public education systems in the country, and one of the most highly educated populations in the country. And all those things are unique to Bellevue that make me feel that we deserve and warrant a unique facility. And perhaps this is that. I'd also be curious to know about, are there international examples of doing a center like this? So maybe we could look outside of our country and look at internationally if we can see some examples of this type of a facility. But I am very interested in knowing how we can move forward with this idea. And we've heard lots of good comments and questions tonight from the council members. I will go through the list again in case anybody didn't get to say something they want to say. And then I would ask staff to tell us what are the next steps in this process. So let's start with Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, once again. I'm greatly gratified and grateful for all the comments from the council. I think this is something that's self-evident. The emphasis really is on capacity building, on the interculture, the cross-culture interaction, people getting to know people. I think that's important key. It's different from a culture center where you go participate. You don't participate. You just go there to be an audience, to be spectator. So I believe that a cross-culture center is one that bring people working together, getting to appreciate, understand, and actually get used to what other culture give us. And this is really the principle of American culture, American value. We are a country of immigrants who are great because we hopefully, idealistic, we're not there, obviously. I'm talking about the ideal, but we have to work toward ideal. We have to be aware of reality. So it's not space per se, if we continue to draw on the space, but it's capacity building. It's people building. I think that's important versus a facility, versus a program. It's people that makes program, the people that makes interaction. So I think that's all I want to say. So I appreciate the council's questions. I think in order to really understand and have a good project that we can all support, we need to have these questions. And I am very happy that the consultant we're working with and the staff, I appreciate, I didn't specifically mention Mariana is relatively new to us, but she is amazing to have understood, I think, what the council and the community wants. And you were able to put it together. And for going forward, I believe, is to prove, to actually ascertain, to actually make it real as to what's the reality. Okay, I think we need to make the effort to at least take the next step. And hopefully we can be proven as correct and we can realize our vision. And that's a step toward the future when we all can be working together as one, not as separate cultures and separate community. We can work with one American culture, American community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Lee. Councilmember Barksdale.
All right, thank you. Just two additional points here. When we think of a multicultural center as what it sounds like I'm hearing, I would take a look at Mohi in Seattle. They do a really good job of bringing various cultures together. And I know it's not a one-to-one comparison, but I think they do a really good job with that. And then secondly, I'd also look at partnering with mom and pop shops that tend to, supporting entrepreneurship of more mom and pop retail shops, but then also partnering with them because that also brings an element of multiculturalism because they are often owned and run by people of different races and ethnicities and cultures. Leave it there.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor Neuenhuis.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I'm very excited about this. Happy to move this forward. For me, at this point, we need to hone in on more of what this is going to look like. So a lot of the questions that were discussed in terms of who's going to provide that ownership, what does partnership look like? Facility, are we talking one facility, multiple facilities? And what is the operating model going to look like? Is it going to be that hybrid model? Is it going to be through the city of Bellevue? Is it going to be a nonprofit oriented and operated? So I think we need to hone down on these issues, but very exciting. Again, thank you, Councilmember Lee, for pushing this forward. Look forward to the next report moving forward. But this is an important step in the process. A lot of great data here that is going to provide us with better and informed decisions moving forward. But happy to support it. And thanks again for the great report. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Councilmember Stokes.
Yeah, it's been a great conversation, and obviously thanks to Conrad Lee. Councilmember Lee's been working this a long time, and I think it's time to bring this, to bring this thing home. The reason I brought up the approach that I'm talking about is because I am concerned about bringing it home. We've been talking about this. We can talk a long time about locating it someplace or the other and building a big facility, and that's a difficult thing. It's interesting. You can have a campus culture is a little, or setting is a little different than a city because obviously everybody's there and it's all together. But we can look at how they've done that. But I really would encourage us to look at this as not just a facility, because then it becomes, it doesn't necessarily could work or could not work. You don't have a lot of leeway, and have a concept that has multiple places as well as maybe a central place at some point. And I think we have a lot of opportunities to work with organizations that can make this happen. The biggest thing is making it happen, because as we know, it's a struggle on these things, particularly if it's a big facility. So I think we have the opportunity, we have some momentum in the city, and we do have a lot of competition for the same type of buildings in the city. And that's a question, and we're adding on to that. So if we want to make this actually work, I think we have to be a little more nimble, a little more flexible, and actually focus on what's the goal is from just what do we want to build. And I think if we do that, we can get here a lot quicker and a lot better and have better programming than if we get stuck in kind of a past approach to things. Because it is going to be hard. I mean, raising the money is going to be very, very difficult. I also am very interested in looking at potential of a parks and cultural levy at some point once we get out of COVID, because that's something that has really made strides in Bellevue, and that will be something to look at. So there are a lot of options, and I really appreciate the work that's been done, and I'm looking forward to continuation on this and having other reports and to actually getting this something done. I'd like to be around when it is built. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Stokes. Councilmember Robertson.
Thank you. This has been a great conversation. You know, I so appreciate this council because yes, we're in a time of COVID, but we're always looking forward to what's the next step. Very, forward-looking council, and also looking at how do we build community, because that's really what this is about. It's how do we build community in a diverse and vibrant and dynamic city. So I think that this is really exciting to talk about. And I do think we're going to have to talk about the funding. And I think that's going to be an important component to whether we do an arts and parks levy, or or we find some other way to do it. But listening to the mayor's comments about the metro site got me thinking. So, and this is really for my colleagues more, but when we sell that site after light rail is open, we can put requirements on it. It affects the price, of course, but we could require whoever we sell it to build us a community center as part of that development. And that would be a cross-cultural community center, and then give it back to us at $1 a year. So that is definitely something we could do as far as the capital money. The operations money is a whole other story, but I think that we can get really innovative, whether it's, looking for new revenue, whether it's looking at city-owned property, looking at, adding it as an incentive to Wilburton, or adding it as a requirement for a piece of property that we own that we're going to sell. So that's an issue for another day, but I'm really excited to hear all the positive momentum on this, and the really us coming together on this idea, because we do need more community centers, and what better than a cross-cultural one. So thanks. I'm ready to hear next steps.
Councilmember Zahn.
Yeah, I'm ready to go. This is so exciting. I agree it's about the people and community. And I want to echo the comment made by Councilmember Barksdale about, I think you mentioned food. So there's a part of me that says community a lot of times is about sharing food. So if there's a way to create some kind of an international community kitchen where there can be incubation of small mom and pop businesses that want to try out, right, selling their food, and then if they're successful, they move out of that space into a more permanent space, and that incubation space becomes available for someone else. So I think that then the fragrance of food and just that whole infusion of the cross-cultural experience, I think will be really important. So I would strongly stress trying to do something like that. And then I agree with my colleagues that to the degree we can get some momentum to move this forward, and we're going to have to talk about the funding model. What does that look like? And also, what are some options so that we can really get a better shape for when we talk about funding models? How much money are we talking about? So, we could look at, is it the size of a bread box, the size of a, something else, so that we can really start to hone in on our vision, because my sense is right now that we want a lot and our eyes might be bigger than our stomach. So we really need to get more clarity there. And to the degree we can have some options and examples, I think that'll be helpful to bring partners in, because they can then interact in that space of more conceptual than right now, which is still a little bit squishy. So I would strongly recommend at least trying to get a couple of options or concepts of, right, some maybe performing art, maybe some meeting spaces, maybe some food, eateries, sitting areas, some space outside, so we can get more shape into what acreage is needed for that space as well. So thank you, super excited.
Well, thank you for the great discussion, and Yuriana, Linda, wonderful presentation. What do you need any direction from us, or can you explain what the next step is?
Yes, Mayor, let me take a stab at it. And I think I just want to reiterate, I think tonight's conversation really does help with exactly what we were hoping for. So Councilmember Lee mentioned in the first round of comments about how 40 stakeholders is great, but we're going to need to expand that in order to get a more feedback about what direction we want to take this. And I would just point out, Linda actually raised this back in June for us too. I think we came into the study with this objective around, let's see what is our current capacity and what are the programming needs, what are some programming concepts. And I think that what was highlighted back in June is that we need to tighten the vision about what could this be and start being more specific about what is it. Because if you talked to 40 different people about what could be a cross-cultural center, we would get 60 different answers from those 40 people. And I think we've gotten a big step into narrowing this down into view. So what I see as the next steps on us being able to have that clearer vision and to be able to start engaging in these conversations and looking at partnerships and bringing other city staff and programs around this idea is, I think first and foremost, we're going to get the final report, and that will be shared with council. We'll get it posted online, and we'll start sharing in that vision of having some even more detail than what we discussed or saw tonight in the appendix. So be looking forward to that. I think the next steps after that is we really do need to, we're going to sit down, we're going to listen to the feedback from tonight. I see two things. One requires no new investment. I think there's a conversation as staff that we can have about the way of programming with our current programs and facilities. Let's keep looking for more and more ways to build connections that build community. And I think that's a great highlight out of tonight's conversation. As far as a cross-cultural center goes, I think that conversation also, a number of ideas of potential partnerships, locations, and things that we can leverage that are already committed came up tonight. I think let us chew on that, and we'll be coming back with more conversation. And I would just invite too that once you have the final report, if you'd like to set up briefings or give Yuriana or I a call on any thoughts, we'll welcome those. And again, we'll look at how we resource this. It'll probably require us partnering even more with a few other departments to leverage this, but that's the work that I think we're committed to do. So thank you very much for sharing your thoughts and ideas tonight.
I'm just going to ask Councilmember Lee if that reflects his goal with this, since he is kind of the brainchild of this.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I completely agree with Kyle. We need to define and make sure the mission is clear, because that's going to differentiate some of the questions that have been raised, including what Kyle mentioned as the second thing to do is perhaps looking at the city's programming with existing facilities. I think that's definitely part of it, but I don't think that should distract or detract from the clear mission and vision. I think the mission and vision we talk about today clearly shows that current facilities, current programming is not adequate. If we still question that, I think that we should make sure. That's the reason why we do the stakeholders, outreach, so that we know that the people, the public, and us, City Council, define this clear mission and clear vision. So I think once we've done that, then it's a matter of the consultant can help us based on all the discussion we just had for the last hour, to see how do we meet this vision, this mission. If the answer is, we can just change our programming. Well, in that case, end of conversation. We just continue to do what we are doing today. But my sense is that we need to at least move forward, not to, because changing programming, changing existing way of doing things for the last 30 years, it's a long drawn out process. It's something, we don't have I think it's going to be challenging. So I think we need to do a parallel process, or by looking at this whole new vision and mission, and we can actually incorporate our city's programming as well, because those are the things we talk about. We need to have whatever facility that makes sense to build this capacity to actually have cross-culture collaboration. That's it. Whether it's 1 building, 3 building, 10 building, existing program, but we should not stop like the mayor you so articulately mentioned. We are Bellevue. Our people is our main thing. With the people we have, we can build the city to something that we can meet or satisfy our vision. So I would like to clarify that. And so let's not hold back. I think most council members, mentioned, let's move forward to get some models, examples. What do we do concurrently? And then we can answer the questions that's been raised. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So Kyle, you have enough direction?
Got it, thank you.
All right, well, thank you, everybody, really appreciate it. And the last thing on our agenda is regional issues, which are written updates in your packet. And if you have any questions, you can contact Joyce after the meeting whenever you'd like to. And I think, Uriana, you almost look like you want to say something there.
Oh, no, I apologize.
No, don't apologize. Okay, I just want to make sure I hadn't cut you off. Okay, so with that, I believe our meeting is adjourned. Thank you so much, everybody. Good night.